Chapter 2372. Someone's coming. Zhang Qingxiao raised her eyebrows and kept the long banner. With a flash of her body as though she was tearing the void apart, she disappeared into the black hole. Not long after, she saw a few Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators sneakily flying over. Similarly, they landed in the black hole and used all sorts of secret techniques in an attempt to break the array. If you guys can break it, even I would be laughing. Zhang Qingxiao popped out half of her head to take a look and sneered, "It's your fortune if you guys can't break it. If you do, the first ones to lose your lives will be you guys." Following which, the corner of Zhang Qingxiao's mouth twitched again. She stretched out her hand and took out dozens of fireball talismans and threw them into the air. Rumble. A loud sound was heard and Zhang Qingxiao's voice screamed again, "Someone is stealing Spring Jinshan's spirit stones. Someone is stealing Spring Jinshan's spirit stones. Quick, let's go take a look." From afar, a group of 6th grade swordsmen were patrolling. Hearing the commotion at Spring Jinshan, they immediately flew over on their swords. As for the few Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators in the black hole, they all rushed out from the hole with a black face. Using their spiritual senses, they saw many swordsmen flying over and were all shocked. Without saying anything, they scattered and fled in all directions like stray dogs. Zhang Qingxiao had already flown far away. Seeing the group of Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators being chased, she laughed so hard that she clutched her stomach and fell into the air. She laughed so hard that tears were about to fall. Time passed very quickly. Day after day, month after month. Closing one's eyes and opening one's eyes would be a night. Opening one's eyes and closing one's eyes would be a day. Sometimes, after closing one's eyes, one would not be able to open them again. Sometimes, even if one opened one's eyes, one would not be able to see the next day's sun. 5 years passed in a blink of an eye. The war between the Dao sect and the sword cultivators continued to expand. The flames of war burned the borders of Huan country, Shi country and Meng country. Sometimes, it would penetrate deep into Huan country, sometimes it would penetrate deep into Shi country and Meng country. Furthermore, just like in the previous battles, the Dao sect was overwhelmed at the start and was not prepared enough. Under the deliberate planning of the sword cultivators, they were always at a disadvantage. However, as the cultivators gradually gained a foothold and adapted to the attacks of the sword cultivators, especially when they were even more shameless than the sword cultivators, this disadvantage was reversed. Both sides were once again in a stalemate. This stalemate was very similar to the glue between lovers. Wherever there were cultivators, there would definitely be swordsmen. And wherever there were swordsmen, there would definitely be cultivators. During this period, there were several famous battles, and both sides had their victories and defeats. However, these big battles were not as loud as the battle at Golden Spring Mountain, nor were the casualties as heavy as the battle at Golden Spring Mountain. The Golden Core cultivators in the meeting hall in terms of cultivation were all outstanding. But in terms of military strategy, how could they be Tu Hong's opponent? Even if they were to stack up, they would not be able to match up to Tu Hong. In these few battles, the victories were all due to Tu Hong's planning. The losses were all due to Tu Hong's compromises. Tu Hong's position in the meeting hall was getting more and more important. The so-called daily duty was just a figurehead. Almost all the key military affairs, the Golden Core cultivators on duty would seek Tu Hong's opinion. Without his opinion, the hearts of the Golden Core cultivators would be empty. Although these Golden Core cultivators were filled with jealousy, but they had no choice. Seeing the rise of Tu Hong, Imperial Thunder Sect's Qian Mo was happy. Because Tu Hong's attitude towards him was obviously different from the other cultivators. Tu Hong was cautious and respectful, subtly raising Qian Mo by half a head. Qian Mo naturally knew what Tu Hong was thinking. Moreover, the 5-year agreement between Imperial Thunder Sect and Sky Patrol City was coming to an end. Tu Hong and Dui Qiming's dual cultivation ceremony was already on the agenda. In these 5 years, Dui Qiming did not participate in any battles. She had always been meditating in the Imperial Thunder Sect's encampment. The place where she, Ming Mao and Dui Ling lived was still the same as before. As time passed, Ming Mao and Dui Ling returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Only Dui Qiming lived alone in the secluded place. Tu Hong often came to visit and informed her of the battles in Sky Patrol City. Dui Qiming was still reserved at first, but gradually she accepted it. Now that the dual cultivation ceremony was about to be held, Dui Qiming was considering whether to move to Tu Hong's residence. According to Qian Mo's observation at the very beginning, Dui Qiming was still a little gloomy. She would always secretly cry, but as time passed her tears turned into lamentation, and lamentation turned into hidden bitterness. In the end the bitterness disappeared, leaving behind only a faint contemplation on her brows. This faint contemplation showed Dui Qiming's temperament, making it easier for people to feel tender affection for her. Hee time. It's the world's best healing spirit pill. No matter if it's the physical body or the heart, it's always effective. Qian Mo couldn't help but praise Tu Hong's brilliance in his heart. Everything in Sky Patrol City and Sword Domain could not change the grand array of Golden Spring Mountain. As the battle spread, the cultivators and swordsmen seemed to have forgotten about Golden Spring Mountain. They also seemed to have forgotten about the flying swords and treasures of the tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators within the grand array. The grand array of Golden Spring Mountain seemed to have become a huge mystery buried deep under Golden Spring Mountain. It would only be revealed 10 years later when the nascent soul cultivators entered the battle. However, what everyone didn't expect was that within this unsolvable mystery, there was a fierce Xiaohua. In these 5 years he cultivated with all his might, refining the almost endless heaven and earth spiritual qi, constantly avoiding the fate of being destroyed by the heaven and earth spiritual qi at any time. As Xiaohua cultivated bitterly, as Xiaohua was struck by the spirit qi again and again, his cultivation also advanced by leaps and bounds. At this time he was already close to the peak of Foundation Establishment late stage. Although Ling Yunwu and the other 12 swordsmen transformed into 12 flying swords, the 7 stars grand array that imprisoned Xiaohua still existed. And because Ling Yunwu and the other swordsmen transformed into flying swords, the power of imprisonment was even stronger and tighter. Of course, with the passage of time, although the power of imprisonment did not weaken, under Xiaohua's cultivation of Foundation Establishment late stage, it had already loosened. In the end, when Xiaohua was already able to resist the attacks of the spirit qi, he even tried to break the 7 stars grand array. However, Xiaohua only dabbled in it and did not really use his full strength. After all, to be so quiet, or to be forced to cultivate by the spirit qi, to Xiaohua, was something that could only be encountered by chance and not sought after. He almost wanted to condense his core or absorb all the spirit qi in the grand array before coming out of seclusion. After all, Xiaohua was clear in his heart that the amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi he needed for cultivation was far beyond that of ordinary cultivators. The green spirit pill he used to advance from Foundation Establishment late stage to Foundation Establishment late stage was probably enough for a nascent soul cultivator to advance from initial stage to intermediate stage. It would be a waste if he did not take advantage of such a great opportunity. However, since entering the peak of Foundation Establishment late stage, Xiaohua could no longer cultivate in peace. It was like a small thorn in his heart. It was not big, but it made him uncomfortable. If he paid attention to it, he could not find any trace of it at all. Is it possible that there is another cause and effect? Or is it because I can't condense my core without Ling Li pill? Xiaohua was not very surprised. Although this feeling was not as strong as when he was looking for Dai in Sentry City, it was obvious that there was another cause and effect waiting for Xiaohua to resolve. He could no longer stay here to cultivate. Forget it. Xiaohua opened his eyes, turned his neck and secretly said, "My seclusion, well, it's a real seclusion of death. I'm afraid that the Masters of Thunder controlling sect will think that I and others have died. Oh, it's bad, isn't it?" Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly realized that it was not a big deal for him to cultivate in seclusion. But wouldn't the Thunder controlling sect and the myriad Thunder Valley be turned upside down? Wouldn't Shueshui be sad? Even if Hongxia Fairy heard it, she would also be sad. Well, it's this kind of cause and effect. Xiaohua nodded, and his divine thoughts swept through the phoenix celestial body that wrapped his whole body. At this time the celestial body was more than 100 feet larger, reaching more than 400 feet. Inside the celestial body, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had condensed into a needle-like crystal pillar. It was surrounded by the netherworld wind and there was a layer of ink sand on it. These crystal thorns were extremely small and they rotated at a high speed. Hundreds of thousands of crystal thorns clustered together, forming a funnel-shaped vortex. These vortexes were densely packed and there were countless of them, covering the phoenix celestial body. However, if one took a closer look, there were still some patterns. There were 132 million small areas, and each area revolved around an imaginary point. These 132 million small crystal spikes revolved in the same pattern, and the pace of their rotation was also the same. However, under the impact of the spirit howl, these 132 million crystal thorns slowly rotated within the phoenix celestial body. Hiss, Xiaohua used his primordial spirit to sense the changes in the celestial body, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He thought to himself, where did this incomplete jade slip come from to the Dawn Rain continent? This is obviously not the path of cultivation of the Dao sect. If one looks at the rotation of these 132 million crystal thorns, it is actually somewhat similar to the star Dao of the Shenkong Pavilion. It's a pity that this cultivation technique is incomplete, and the space for improvement is limited. As for how far this celestial body can cultivate in the future, it will depend on this young master's luck. What does this young master lack? Maybe spirit stones, maybe pills, maybe cultivation techniques, but what about luck? This young master has never lacked anything. Xiaohua couldn't help but think of the auspicious jade talisman that he kept close to his body. However, since this cultivation technique needs to be cleansed with spiritual energy at the beginning, the threshold is really too high. If I want to cultivate in the future, I'm afraid that the conditions will be even more terrible, right? This kind of thing that scares this young master to death, it's better not to come to it. The vengeful spirits that had faded into the smoke seemed to have seen the beauty of heaven and earth, and swarmed forward like a swarm of bees. And, seeing that the Buddha's relic was not affected by the spiritual pressure, Xiaohua inwardly nodded, then secretly laughed. Of course, the vengeful spirits are not afraid of the spiritual pressure, so the Buddha's relic is even less afraid. Immediately after, Xiaohua did not hesitate. The Buddha's relic chanted the 9 syllables of truth, and the brilliant golden descend characters flew out from the Buddha's mouth one by one, landing on each of the vengeful spirits. Those vengeful spirits were originally the vengeful spirits of cultivators and swordsmen, and were filled with unyielding and injustice. When that army character landed on them, a wisp of green smoke immediately flew out from their bodies, and their entire souls became clear. Those souls once again transformed into human form, bowed towards the Buddha's relic and said, "Many thanks to the Venerable One," then immediately disappeared. And that wisp of green smoke also floated within the spiritual pressure, disappearing without a trace. However, at the same time that it disappeared, an even smaller blood-like thing that even Buddha's sense could not detect fell into Xiaohua's Buddha's heart. It turned into the Buddha's fire, and on top of the Buddha's fire, there was a small red dot that rushed into the tempering of the execution dream. Xiaohua originally wanted to do merits, but he did not expect that once he did it he would not be able to stop, and it was delayed for dozens of days. Damn it! This Tu Hong has really committed a great sin. I'm afraid there are close to 100,000 vengeful spirits. In the end, Xiaohua himself was somewhat angry. He originally thought that it would be good if there were a few thousand, but who would have thought that it would actually increase by 10 times? Moreover, these vengeful spirits actually did not leave, and all of them stayed here, clearly harboring resentment towards Tu Hong. Sigh, if I think about it again, swordsmen are vicious. If this guy did not hold back, if he did not act so ruthlessly, the cultivators would also suffer heavy casualties. Xiaohua was the most sympathetic towards the suffering of others, and he only needed to put himself in their shoes to immediately understand the difficulties within. In the end, this is a great sword battle. Although these vengeful spirits are pitiful, there is nothing that can be done about it. Who told the sword cultivators to start this great battle? Naturally, this young master can ignore this kind of haggling. However, Tu Hong directly placed my thunder-controlling sect's first small team inside the Great Formation, making it clear that he wants the lives of the 7 of us. No matter what the other cultivators do, we will definitely lose our lives. This karma, this young master will not let it go. A trace of ruthlessness flashed through Xiaohua's eyes. But why did he do this? Could it be that he received instructions from someone else? It's possible. Maybe Tu Hong and that old ghost Jingru have some kind of friendship. In that case, this young master has implicated Cui Hongshan and the others. Xiaohua sighed. In these 5 years his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. while Cui Hongshan and the other 4 had been unconscious for an entire 5 years. Xiaohua still felt a bit guilty in his heart. Let's talk about it when there's a chance in the future. Xiaohua thought to himself. Even if there's no benefit, at least we still manage to hold on to our lives, right? You can't resent this young master. Xiaohua was finding excuses for himself again. After waiting for the last vengeful spirit to finish transcending, Xiaohua was a bit bewildered. That's not right, that female swordsman's soul is still here, but the other 12, no, the other 20 swordsmen's souls are not here? Could it be that their souls have already dissipated? Or are they inside the flying sword? Chapter 2374. Xiaohua didn't have any feelings for Ling Yunwu and the others. If it weren't for them, he was afraid that he wouldn't have such an opportunity. Since he didn't see the souls of these swordsmen, he was naturally puzzled. Well, even if they are in the flying swords, they have already turned into sword spirits. How can I be afraid of them? Thinking about it, Xiaohua put away the Buddha's saraira and waved his hand, holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. Xiaohua tried his best to hit the staff in midair. With a loud bang, the power of the 7 stars array was loosened by the wishful steel staff. Not in the 5 elements, Xiaohua snorted coldly. This wishful steel staff is really powerful. It directly attacks the power of imprisonment. It's really something that other magic weapons can't do. Now that he had a treasure like the wishful steel staff, Xiaohua's strength had a place to be used. He raised the wishful steel staff with both hands and struck the power of the 7 stars great array, breaking it little by little. Since the 7 stars array was the secret technique of the Lingfeng sword sect, it must be incomparably powerful. If there was a swordsman presiding over it, it might not be so easy for Xiaohua to break it. Unfortunately, there were only 12 flying swords. They were dead objects. Even if there were sword spirits in the flying swords, how could they control the array? In less than half an hour, the 7 stars array was broken by the incomparably brave Xiaohua with the wishful steel staff. As the array was broken, the 12 flying swords wailed at the same time and were about to leave the air. You still want to leave at this time? What wishful thinking! Xiaohua sneered and waved his big sleeve. The 12 flying swords were imprisoned by him. They obediently stopped in midair. Collect. Xiaohua waved his sleeve and the 12 flying swords fell into the space. Then Xiaohua took out the sword from the sword pouch and let his primordial spirit comprehend it. His figure swayed slightly and was about to fly to the ground. However, just as he moved, the spiritual energy swarmed into his body, scaring him. Oh, so that's how it is. This spiritual energy is so powerful. The more you want to escape, the more it will enter. I'm afraid that the vast majority of cultivators and swordsmen will explode like this. Thus, Xiaohua hurriedly stopped and released the Phoenix Dharma body to block the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He tried his best to refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that entered his body. Forget it, let's just slowly move. After Xiaohua finished refining his spiritual energy, he didn't dare to be rash and slowly moved towards the edge of the underground Great Formation. Oh, what's this? Xiaohua had just flown for a moment when he discovered a sawtooth flying sword in front of him. Oh motherfucker. I've been running for my life for so long that I've turned stupid. Xiaohua immediately realized, if those 12 sword cultivators can transform into flying swords, then the other swordsmen can naturally do the same. The flying swords transformed by the illusory swordsmen are extremely precious. Needless to say, the greedy Xiaohua began to search again. However, there were more surprises to come. Gradually, Xiaohua realized that not only were there sword cultivators flying swords, there were also many Dharma treasures of Tao sect cultivators that were left unscathed in the soil. Xiaohua, who was wild with joy, was so happy that he scratched his ears and cheeks. It was as if he was picking up treasures. He kept them all in his space. However, when he calmed down a little, Xiaohua remembered, I can't take them all. I still have to go out from here in a while and return to Sky Patrol City. If I loot everything here, how can I explain it? After thinking for a while, Xiaohua found the main point of his search. He didn't want ordinary Dharma artifacts and Dharma treasures, and he didn't care about ordinary flying swords either. However, after another hour, Xiaohua was in trouble. Which Dharma treasure or Dharma artifact that could avoid the attack of the spirit howl was easy to obtain? Xiaohua picked up this one and threw that one away. Every one of them made his heart bleed. Who cares? I took it, so what? Who can make me spit it out? Xiaohua was ruthless. Even if that old ghost Jingru comes now, I can easily escape, right? Thinking of this, the 2 Dharma treasures in his hands disappeared and were sent into his space. Who cares about them? In fact, it was ridiculous to say that these Dharma artifacts and Dharma treasures, Xiaohua couldn't use most of them. However, Xiaohua liked them and just wanted to keep them for himself. There was no other reason, it was his nature. Thinking about it, it took Xiaohua a few days to pick up the items of 100,000 cultivators and swordsmen. Among them, he only picked up the ones that were in good condition and threw away the ones that he didn't care about. When Xiaohua wobbled from the bottom of the great array to the top, and from the left to the right, there were so many things in this space. Xiaohua wobbled and laughed foolishly. It was really a blessing for fools. Not only Dharma treasures and flying swords, Xiaohua also picked up a lot of sword slips. Even like Ling Yunwu, Xiaohua picked up 6 of the illusory swordsman's transformed flying swords, making a total of 18 swords. What made Xiaohua the happiest was that he didn't know which sword cultivator's storage bag it came from, but there was actually a white bone palm that matched the huge skeleton in his space. Speaking of which, it took Xiaohua more than 10 days to walk through the entire great array and collect all the essences. Then he slowly and leisurely headed towards the ground. When he arrived at the edge of the great array, he used his divine sense to carefully examine it, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously revealed a smile. This edge was different from before. It wasn't that kind of tyrannical and unstable restriction. Instead, it was a kind of sturdy restriction. Xiaohua pondered for a moment and used his transcendence vision to look and found the weak point of the restriction. Without hesitation, he took out the rabbit talisman and imbued it with his transcendence energy. When several rabbit talismans were embedded into the spirit array, the edges of the spirit array began to change. The previously stable restriction began to show signs of loosening. Once these signs of loosening appeared, it immediately became like a whirlwind that swept away the clouds. Could no longer be contained. This is bad. When Xiaohua saw this, he immediately understood. Although the edge of the array was stable and the place he had touched was only a small corner, it had already caused the entire array to lose its balance. The loss of balance at the edge of the array wasn't a big deal. The key was that the spiritual howl within the array was constantly washing over it. Although 5 years had already passed, the spiritual howl hadn't even subsided by 20%. Once the edge of the array lost its balance, the spiritual howl immediately increased, and rushed towards Xiaohua's location like a swarm of bees. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent, and hastily summoned his phoenix Dharma body, and with a wave of his hand he collected several rabbit talismans. Wung! A thunderous howl resounded from within the array. The stirred-up spiritual howl came from behind Xiaohua, and from every possible direction, slapped towards the loosened edge of the array. Xiaohua could only summon his phoenix Dharma body, and at the same time the crystal thorns in his body rapidly revolved. He also activated his mental cultivation method and secret technique, and did his utmost to refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Woo, boom, with merely a huge impact the edge of the array was broken, and with a sound like a chain, the entire array completely collapsed. In an instant, an incomparably powerful force was born from within the spirit stone mine of MT Spring Gold. With a thunderous momentum, it slapped towards the surroundings, rushed into the air and rushed towards the ground. Boom, as if a dozen nascent soul cultivators had joined forces to attack, MT Spring Gold trembled, and countless mountain rocks and dust rushed into the sky, and countless dust fragments spread in all directions. The entire heaven and earth was completely covered by the dust. That incomparably pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth also instantly filled the area within a radius of several li. Furthermore, it spread towards the surroundings at an extremely fast speed. In merely an instant, a deep pit of several li in size formed within MT Spring Gold. Wu, following closely, countless hurricanes accompanied by the diffusion of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth formed in the surroundings of MT Spring Gold. All the trees, snow, mountain rocks and other things within 100 li were swept up into the sky, and were thrown far away. What's going on? Just as the array exploded in the air several li away from MT Spring Gold, there were 2 groups of disciples patrolling. One group was made up of Dao sect disciples, and the other group was made up of sword cultivators. All of them were in the middle stage of foundation establishment. A Tao sect cultivator at the peak of the middle stage of foundation establishment suddenly felt that something was amiss. Just as he had the time to shout out, the hurricane attacked him and a powerful force swept through his body. It was extremely barbaric and also extremely easy to tear him into pieces. There was simply no room for resistance. The other dozen cultivators were even more miserable. Before they could even think, they were swept up by the hurricane, and just as they were blown a few feet into the air, they were immediately torn apart. The group of sword cultivators were slightly stronger than the other cultivators. Their bodies were sturdy and the flying swords under their feet were also fast. Unfortunately, they were only able to fly for several tens of li before they were pulled down from their flying swords by a powerful and chaotic force. They were forcefully thrown into the hurricane. The most pitiful one was a level 5 swordsman. Although he tried his best to control the flying sword to fly, there was still a broken flying sword in the hurricane. The huge force blew the flying sword upside down and directly penetrated the swordsman's chest with the sword hilt. It did not stop for a moment at all and rushed into the air with a whistling sound. It flew straight into the mountain rock 1,000 feet away and only stopped after it was inserted for hundreds of feet. With such a powerful force, it was no wonder that Tu Hong was so calm. He was absolutely not afraid that someone would break the array. Even a nascent soul cultivator would find it difficult to protect himself from such a huge explosion of spiritual qi, right? Unfortunately, no matter how much he calculated, he still missed out on one. That was Xiao Hua, who was breaking the array within the array. The inside of the array was completely different from the outside. Although it was only the boundary of the array, the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. When the array collapsed, Xiao Hua tried his best to escape into the array, using the Phoenix Dharma body to protect his body. When he could no longer resist the force of the explosion of spiritual qi, he stopped resisting and rushed out of the array along with the hurricane produced by the spiritual qi. Moreover, Xiao Hua was breaking the array from the bottom. His figure followed the hurricane and rushed straight into the sky. Xiao Hua's figure gradually accelerated. Those magic treasures and flying swords that were enough to kill golden core cultivators were the same speed as him, and some were even in front of him. They simply did not pose any threat to him. Chapter 2375. These 7 people came from the direction of Mt. Chuanjin's array. Zhang Exin immediately understood and shouted, "They are the disciples of the patrol team in front of us. Quickly save them." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly took action. Using magic tools and other methods, they pulled Xiao Hua and the others out from the foothills. "Damn it, can't you be a bit more gentle?" Xiao Hua closed his eyes and cursed inwardly. "He directly pulled me out with a rope. If it weren't for my thick skin, wouldn't that pull have injured my tendons and bones? I don't even know how to save people." "Senior brother Zhang, these 7 people are on their last breaths." Seeing the state of the 7 people, a disciple hurriedly said, "We do have some pills in our storage pouches, but there aren't many." "That's not right, Senior Brother Zhang. This is the Imperial Thunder Sect's robe. These 7 people are Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples." Another clever disciple discovered, "The patrolling disciples in front of us are from Cool Breeze Valley." Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples? 7 people? Zhang Exion's eyes lit up and hurriedly looked over. When he saw Xiao Hua's face, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. "That's right, it's the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. This guy is Xiao Hua. I recognize these 7 people. They are the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples who fell in the Battle of Mt. Quanjin. They actually didn't die. Quick, don't care about the pills. Quickly give them to them. We must preserve their lives. This is a greater contribution than magic treasures." Yes, this disciple understands. When the disciple who was stingy with the pills heard this, he didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately took out healing pills from his storage pouch and put one into the mouths of Xiao Hua and the others. After everyone had consumed the elixir, Zhang Exion's heart was slightly at ease. He looked around and pointed to the cave that Xiao Hua had previously used. "These 7 people are seriously injured and cannot be moved for the time being. We will first place the 7 people in the cave and leave 1 person to guard it. The others will follow this poor Taoist to search inside." Yes, this disciple understands. The group of disciples then hurriedly threw the 7 people into the cave. That crude force was only slightly inferior to when Xiao Hua threw the 6 people into the stone wall. This is really karma. Xiao Hua was speechless as he enjoyed the treatment of being thrown away. Fortunately, the disciples of the Utopia faction were well-mannered. They placed the 7 people in different places, lying on their backs instead of piling them together. After making arrangements for Xiao Hua and the others, Zhang Exin once again left behind an early-stage Foundation establishment disciple, while the others once again headed towards the Golden Spring Mountain Range. After another 3 to 4 days, the spiritual energy explosion at Mount Quanjin finally attracted cultivators and swordsmen. Within a radius of 10 miles around Mount Quanjin, human figures began to appear. At this moment, Zhang Exin and the rest had already arrived near the Golden Spring Mountain Range. At the same time, they could also see the huge crater in the Golden Spring Mountain Range. Facing such a huge crater, Zhang Exin was even more speechless. He could easily imagine the scene when the array collapsed. That unstoppable ferocity. Naturally, he thought of Xiao Hua, who was lucky enough to survive. "Sai, why is there such a big difference between people?" This sentence flashed into his mind again. Zhang Exin and the other disciples of the Utopia faction searched the crater in Golden Spring Mountain for a day and found a lot of magic treasures and the remains of magic treasures. When a cultivator scanned the crater with his spiritual sense, Zhang Exin immediately left with his disciples. They had already gained enough. It was not worthwhile to have any more conflicts with others and even lose their lives. When Zhang Exin and the rest returned to the cave, the 2 people he sent to deliver the message had also returned from the teleportation device. Following closely were a few guards from the Sky Patrol City. They were also shocked that Xiao Hua and the rest were still alive. An hour after Zhang Exin's return, Xiao Hua, Cui Hongshan and the rest also woke up one after another. When he saw Zhang Exin and the rest, Cui Hongshan was stunned and hurriedly said, Where is this? Is the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine still in the hands of the Taoist faction?" Xiao Hua was also stunned. Looking at the somewhat familiar face of Zhang Exin, he hesitated and said, "Are you, fellow cultivator Zhang from the Utopia faction?" Junior brother Xiao, of course it's me." Zhang Exin looked at Xiao Hua's almost unchanged face and said with a smile, "I am Zhang Exin, who participated in the Taiching sect's Feather Deity Conference. After not seeing each other for decades, I look old, but junior brother Xiao is still as youthful as ever." "Sai, it's nothing." Xiao Hua waved his hand, looked at Cui Hongshan and asked again, "Senior brother Zhang, where is this? Is this the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine? What happened to me and the rest?" Junior brother Xiao." Zhang Exin looked at Xiao Hua, then looked at Cui Hongshan and the rest, who were confused, and said with a smile, "This must be Captain Cui Hongshan, right?" Cui Hongshan nodded and said, "That's me, senior brother Zhang from the Utopia faction. Nice to meet you. It's a long story about Golden Spring Mountain. I won't explain it in detail here. We'll return to the Sky Patrol City now. On the way I'll explain it slowly." Zhang Exin thought for a while and said, "Eh." Xiao Hua nodded, but Cui Hongshan frowned and said, "Senior brother Zhang, what happened to Golden Spring Mountain? Why are we here? And we just recovered from our injuries?" Zhang Exin laughed softly. "The Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine no longer exists. As for how brother Cui got injured, I don't know. However, when I saw all of you, your lives were hanging by a thread. Fortunately, although your injuries are serious, they're all on the skin and flesh. Your meridians and dantian are still intact. You'll naturally recover in these few days. Fellow Taoists, you are all lucky." Sai, thinking about some of our friends. As he spoke, Zhang Exin's face paled. Xiao Hua understood and said softly, "Senior brother Zhang, senior brother Yang Fangqing, it seems like, junior brother Xiao has met senior brother Yang before, right?" "Yes, and senior brother He Fang Yuan from Taiching sect, and senior brother Kuxingxi from Kunlun sect. They're all old friends of mine." Sai, only senior brother He Fang Yuan was lucky enough to escape from Golden Spring Mountain and has returned to Taiching sect now. Zhang Exin sighed, "I only heard about him 5 years ago. I haven't heard about him for the past few years." 5 years ago? Senior brother Zhang, what do you mean?" Zhen Minghui was baffled and asked unconsciously. Zhang Exin stood up and said, "Let's go. Now that Golden Spring Mountain's formation has unexpectedly exploded, it attracted many cultivators and swordsmen. We should hurry back to patrol Heaven City." "Golden Spring Mountain's formation? What's going on?" Cui Hongshan was puzzled, but immediately after his face showed a trace of shock as he looked at Jin Minghui and said, Senior Brother Minghui, the formation that Senior Brother Zhang mentioned, is it that layer of restriction? Chapter 2376. After exiting the formation, there was no more heaven and earth spiritual qi attacking Xiaohua's body and meridians. Xiaohua's body relaxed and with a long roar he somersaulted in the air. The phoenix celestial body spread its wings and flew along the side of the hurricane. After waiting for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the phoenix celestial body flew to the edge of the hurricane. With a loud and clear cry, the phoenix celestial body spread its 400 zhang wings and carried Xiaohua out of the hurricane with ease. Outside the hurricane was naturally 1,000 zhang high in the sky, and the wind was biting cold. A thin layer of golden light naturally appeared around Xiaohua's body, protecting his entire body. Roar outside the hurricane, the world was vast and the boundless snow was in sight. Xiaohua couldn't help but let out a long roar. The world was so big and everything was under his control. Xiaohua's heart was instantly filled with the feeling of being free and unfettered. Good boy. After flying for a while, Xiaohua withdrew the phoenix celestial body and spread out his divine sense. When he saw that all the living things within 100 li were killed, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. After thinking for a while he understood the clues and he felt even more lucky. Then Xiaohua looked at the huge pit in the Golden Spring mountain range, and his mind spun rapidly, thinking of how to explain the reason why he and Cui Hongshan were able to survive. I'm afraid that's the only way. Xiaohua thought for a while and came up with a plan. His body turned in a circle in midair and with a thunderous roar he flew towards the west. After flying for a few dozen miles, they arrived at a steep mountain range. At this time there was no snow on the mountain range and the forest was also destroyed. On the bare foot of the mountain there was a small cave in front of them. Xiaohua laughed and pointed with his hand. This is the place. Thus Xiaohua flew into the cave, sat down cross-legged and took out the Buddha Saraira. After that he pulled Cui Hongshan and the others out of the space, erasing their memories one by one and even slightly changing some things. After waiting for half an hour Xiaohua proudly came out of the cave. Then Xiaohua flew in midair and thought for a while. He looked around and even pinched his chin. When his brows relaxed he grabbed Cui Hongshan from the space again and hit him with a hand seal. Then without hesitation he used his strength to smash Cui Hongshan into the mountain range. Rumble! Cui Hongshan's body smashed into the mountain range and made a huge sound. Light flashed around his body and his body was embedded in the mountain range. He smashed more than 10 zhang. Haha, it's so refreshing. If Cui Hongshan's father Cui Hongshan will be angry. Xiaohua clapped his hands and his divine sense swept past Cui Hongshan. He saw that although Cui Hongshan was already heavily injured, it was not enough to take his life. Xiao had to do it. Xiao. Xiaohua was Xiao's as Xiao of the same. Finally Xiaohua himself was the same. He screamed in midair and rushed into the mountain range. 7 human-shaped caves were formed at the foot of the mountain. Zhang Exin was a disciple of the Utopia faction in the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He was short and had an ordinary appearance. As a cultivator, appearance and figure were secondary. As long as your cultivation was high, who would dare to look down on you? Unfortunately, Zhang Exin's aptitude was just like his figure and appearance. He was too ordinary. When he was cultivating qi, he narrowly passed the Utopia faction's disciple selection and became a cultivator. Now that he had the conditions to cultivate, Zhang Exin was full of energy and wanted to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. However, there were no shortcuts in cultivation. If you didn't have the aptitude, you couldn't do it. Even if you didn't sleep every day and cultivated all the time, you couldn't compare with those with good aptitude. In the Utopia faction, Li Zongbao was a typical example. Zhang Exin joined the Utopia faction with Li Zongbao. However, Li Zongbao easily reached the Foundation establishment stage and even reached the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. Zhang Exin was still stuck at the peak of level 12 of the Qi refining stage and couldn't reach the Foundation establishment stage for a long time. Fortunately, Zhang Exin worked hard and earned an opportunity to participate in the Feather Deity Conference. However, the result was not out of his expectations. Although he was ranked in the top 32, he was shocked again in the competition for the extraterrestrial divine object. It turned out that on the Dawn Rain continent, except for Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction, he couldn't compare with Yun Guichong of the Washed Flower sect and Hong Xiaoferi. Even Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder sect, who didn't enter the top 32, was far behind him. Needless to say, he retreated helplessly in the face of Yun Guichong's magic weapon. Needless to say, he was extremely surprised by Hong Xiaoferi's betrayal. Needless to say, Yun Guichong and Hong Xiaoferi had both reached the peak of the qi refining stage and only wanted to reach the completion of the qi refining stage with the help of the soul accumulation talisman. He just remembered that he had seen Xiao Hua's amazing strength with his own eyes. He actually took out the Great Wisdom Sword. His heart had been trembling for more than 10 years. How could there be such a big difference between people? This thought, even after he had reached the foundation establishment stage, it still lingered in his heart. Even when the Great War of Tao cultivators began, he who hadn't broken through the foundation establishment stage for a long time, was selected to join the expedition together with Yang Fengqing. He still didn't get rid of this thought. However, 5 years ago he suddenly woke up. Yes, there is such a big difference between people. Opportunities are always different. However, no matter what the difference is, no matter what the opportunity is, as long as one is alive, there is a chance. This was because Yang Fengqing, who had been sent to the expedition together with him, had died in the Battle of Mount Quanjin. Not even his corpse was left behind. Thinking of Yang Fengqing, Zhang Exin felt a little sad. Yang Fengqing's experience was very similar to his. The two of them had even participated in the Feather Immortal Conference together. This time the two of them were together in the expedition. However, Yang Fengqing was more mature than Zhang Exin. He didn't complain as much as Zhang Exin. He just cultivated diligently. After hearing the news of Yang Fengqing's death, the first thing Zhang Exin did was to apply for a mission from the deacon. He was to bring his team of 9 disciples to patrol Mount Quanjin, hoping to find Yang Fengqing's corpse. Of course, patrolling Mount Quanjin wasn't an easy task. Every sect had a chance and even every team had a chance. However, Zhang Exin knew that other than himself, who sincerely wanted to find Yang Fengqing's corpse, most of the other teams were here for the magic treasures in the array. Today was the day that the Utopia faction would replace the Cool Breeze Valley team. Zhang Exin brought his team and set off a few days earlier. Just when they were a few hundred miles away from Mount Quanjin, they encountered the rupture of the array. There was an earth-shattering sound, and there was a strange phenomenon of a hurricane soaring into the sky. Even from a few hundred miles away, there was a pressure of spiritual energy fluctuations. Zhang Exin's first reaction was that there was a problem with the array of Mount Quanjin. He sent 2 of his disciples back to report the news, while he urged the rest of his disciples to follow him and rush towards Mount Quanjin. When Zhang Exin arrived within a few hundred miles of Mount Quanjin, the impact of the explosion of heaven and earth's spiritual qi had already passed. Looking at the unimaginable mess on the ground, Zhang Exin was dumbfounded. The stubbornness in his heart was instantly destroyed. There was nothing to say. Even if Yang Fengqing was alive, he wouldn't have been able to escape from the array, not to mention his corpse. Senior Zhang. Look, there's a magic treasure over there. A foundation establishment stage disciple didn't think as much as Zhang Exin. He used his spiritual will to scan the area and found a strange fluctuation of spiritual energy. He shouted happily. Oh. Zhang Exin used his spiritual will to scan the area and understood that the magic treasure in the array was blown here by the explosion of heaven and earth's spiritual qi. Hurry. Zhang Exin said anxiously, the array is damaged. I'm afraid there won't be any cultivators or swordsmen within a few hundred miles. We are the first batch to arrive here. These magic treasures are what we want to find. It's also our great contribution. Yes, this disciple understands. The others were overjoyed. Without waiting for Zhang Exin's urging, they hurriedly used their flying techniques and released their spiritual will. They searched the ground inch by inch and began their treasure hunting journey. The magic treasures and flying swords of tens of thousands of cultivators and swordsmen were definitely a terrifying number. Although Xiaohua took a lot, there were still a lot left in the array. However, although there were many things, if the array exploded, the items would be like fried beans. He couldn't help but feel disappointed. As he spoke, he followed the traces of the 7 people in the stone walls and looked in the direction of Jingquan Mountain. Chapter 2377. These 7 people came from the direction of Mt. Chuanjin's array. Zhang Exin immediately understood and shouted, "They are the disciples of the patrol team in front of us. Quickly save them." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly took action. Using magic tools and other methods, they pulled Xiaohua and the others out from the foothills. "Damn it, can't they be a little more gentle?" Xiaohua closed his eyes and cursed inwardly. "He directly pulled me out with a rope. If it weren't for my thick skin, I would have been injured by this pull. I don't even know how to save people." "Senior brother Zhang, these 7 people are on their last breaths." Seeing the state of the 7 people, a disciple hurriedly said, "We have some pills in our storage pouches, but there aren't many." "That's not right, Senior brother Zhang. This is Imperial Thunder Sect's robe. These 7 people are Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples." Another quick-witted disciple discovered, "The patrolling disciples in front of us are from Cool Breeze Valley." Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples? 7 people? Zhang Exion's eyes lit up and he hurriedly looked over. When he saw Xiaohua's face, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. "That's right, it's Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. This guy is Xiaohua. I recognize these 7 people. They are the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples who fell in the Battle of Mt. Quanjin. They actually didn't die. Quick, don't care about the pills. Quickly give them to them. We must preserve their lives. This is a greater contribution than magic treasures." Yes, this disciple understands. When the disciple who was stingy with the pills heard this, he didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately took out healing pills from his storage pouch and put one into the mouths of Xiaohua and the others. After everyone had taken the pills, Zhang Exion's heart was slightly relieved. He looked around and pointed to the cave that Xiaohua had used before and said, "These 7 people are seriously injured and can't be moved for the time being. We will first put them in the cave and leave one person to guard it. The others will follow I to search inside." Yes, this disciple understands. The group of disciples then hurriedly threw the 7 people into the cave. That crude force was only slightly inferior to when Xiaohua threw the 6 people into the stone wall. This is really karma. Xiaohua was speechless as he enjoyed the treatment of being thrown away. Fortunately, the disciples of the Utopia faction were well-mannered. They placed the 7 people in different places, lying on their backs instead of piling them together. After making arrangements for Xiaohua and the others, Zhang Exin once again left behind an early-stage Foundation establishment disciple, while the others once again headed towards the Golden Spring Mountain Range. After another 3 to 4 days, the spiritual energy explosion at Mount Quanjin finally attracted cultivators and swordsmen. Within a radius of 10 miles around Mount Quanjin, human figures began to appear. At this moment, Zhang Exin and the rest had already arrived near the Golden Spring Mountain Range. At the same time, they could also see the huge crater in the Golden Spring Mountain Range. Facing such a huge crater, Zhang Exin was even more speechless. He could easily imagine the scene when the array collapsed. That unstoppable ferocity. Naturally, he thought of Xiaohua, who was lucky enough to survive. "Sai, why is there such a big difference between people?" This sentence flashed into his mind again. Zhang Exin and the other disciples of the Utopia faction searched the crater in Golden Spring Mountain for a day and found a lot of magic treasures and the remains of magic treasures. When a cultivator's divine thought swept across the crater, Zhang Exin immediately left with the disciples vigilantly. They had already gained enough. It was not worthwhile to have any more conflicts with others and even lose their lives. When Zhang Exin and the rest returned to the cave, the 2 people he sent to deliver the message had also returned from the teleportation device. Following closely behind were a few guards from the Sky Patrol City. They were also shocked that Xiaohua and the rest were still alive. An hour after Zhang Exin returned, Xiaohua, Cui Hongshan and the rest also woke up one after another. When he saw Zhang Exin and the rest, Cui Hongshan was stunned and hurriedly said, Where is this? Is the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine still in the hands of the Taoist faction?" Xiaohua was also stunned. Looking at the somewhat familiar face of Zhang Exin, he hesitated and said, "Are you, fellow cultivator Zhang from the Utopia faction?" "Junior brother Xiao, of course it's me." Zhang Exin looked at Xiao Hua's almost unchanged face and said with a smile, I am Zhang Exin, who participated in the Taiching Sect's Feather Deity Conference. After not seeing each other for decades, I look old, but junior brother Xiao is still as youthful as ever. Zai, it's nothing. Xiao Hua waved his hand, looked at Cui Hongshan and asked again, Senior brother Zhang, where is this? Is this the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine? What happened to me and the rest? He, junior brother Xiao. Zhang Exin looked at Xiao Hua, then looked at Cui Hongshan and the rest who were confused and said with a smile, this must be Captain Cui Hongshan, right? Cui Hongshan nodded and said, that's me, senior brother Zhang from the Utopia faction. Nice to meet you. It's a long story about Golden Spring Mountain. I won't explain it in detail here. We'll return to the Sky Patrol City now. On the way I'll explain it slowly. Zhang Exin thought for a while and said, eh. Xiao Hua nodded, but Cui Hongshan frowned and said, Senior brother Zhang, what happened to Golden Spring Mountain? Why are we here? At this time when they heard about it they could not help but have goosebumps and feel lucky. Naturally Zhang Exin and the rest also knew why Cui Hongshan and the rest could survive. It was because they had set up a defense in the spiritual stone mine and were responsible for attacking the swordsmen who went deep into the spiritual stone mine. When the spell was activated, they were being chased by the swordsmen and just happened to escape to the edge of the spell. That was because the spell had not been fully formed. With the help of the spiritual howl, they were embedded in the edge of the spell. It was also because of this that they escaped the attack of the spiritual howl and escaped with their lives. When the spell collapsed, they were thrown out of the spell of Golden Spring Mountain along with the spiritual howl and shot straight into the foothills of the mountain. Oh my god! The 9 people of the Utopia faction were fascinated by the story. This was simply the legendary fortune. This was something that could not be encountered even in a million years. What a coincidence! How could they have encountered it? However, they had no choice but to believe it. If they did not manage to gather all the swordsmen together, how could they, who were only in the Foundation establishment stage, survive the spiritual howl? That was the fall of 30 Golden Core stage swordsmen. Seeing Cui Hongshan and the rest's solemn expressions as well as their expressions of relief and fear, Xiao Hua heaved a long sigh of relief. Damn it, if even these words cannot be deceived, then I have no other way. Xiao Hua thought to himself. Oh yes, I have a small matter to ask. Cui Hongshan thought for a moment and asked softly. Please ask, my friend Cui. Zhang Exin was rather courteous. He was clear that although Cui Hongshan did not contribute in the battle at Golden Spring Mountain, these 7 people were still survivors and must be heavily rewarded. But how are the other 3 people from the Imperial Thunder Sect doing? Cui Hongshan looked at Zhang Exin carefully, afraid that there would be some bad news. To be continued. Chapter 2378. Oh, about that. Zhang Exin said with a smile. In the Battle of Golden Spring Mountain, there were 17 survivors from my sect. Among them were 3 female cultivators from the Imperial Thunder Sect. They were also rewarded. As for what happened in these 5 years, I don't know. Thank you, fellow cultivator Zhang. Cui Hongshan was overjoyed. But then his face showed a trace of loneliness. He looked up at the sky and said, Alas, 5 years passed in a flash. My glory is like a song. Damn it, the disciples of a cultivation family are so arrogant. Xiao Hua sneered disdainfully. It's a pity that 5 years are gone for no reason. Cui Hongshan flew with the disciples of the utmost happiness faction. He didn't use his magic power. At this moment he sighed in his heart and endured the pain. However, as soon as he started to use the heart technique he was stunned. Seeing the astonishment on Cui Hongshan's face as he stopped his cocky fart, Xiao Hua was still bewildered. Without waiting for him to carefully ponder over it, Shen Hua and Bai Sugu, who were behind him, cried out in alarm. Martial Uncle Xiao Jr. Jr. is about to build his foundation. Building his foundation? Building his foundation now? Xiao Hua was also taken aback. He hurriedly swept his divine sense over. Wasn't that the case? Shen Hua and Bai Sugu's bodies were flashing with brilliance. Their divine senses were in a state of being released, and the pressure of the foundation establishment stage was gradually emerging. Wasn't this the state of foundation establishment? Why are you building your foundation here? Zhang Exin was shocked. Building one's foundation must attract the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If it was a normal day, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, they were in the vicinity of Golden Spring Mountain, which was very sensitive. It would definitely attract the attention of cultivators and swordsmen. If it was cultivators, they would leave. But how could swordsmen let you build your foundation safely? Do you want to use the soul accumulation talisman? Xiao Hua knew it was inappropriate and hurriedly asked. Zhen Hua and Bai Sugu looked at each other. Their eyes were full of bitterness. They had cultivated bitterly for more than 10 years and finally built their foundation. If they used the soul accumulation talisman, who knew if they couldn't build their foundation? They couldn't be compared with those disciples with heavenly aptitudes. However, if they didn't use the soul accumulation talisman, they understood the danger of this place from Zhang Exion's tone. Forget it. Zhen Hua smiled bitterly. I am willing to use the soul accumulation talisman. Disciple 2. Baisugu also cupped his fists and said. Is that so? Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out 2 accumulating spirit talismans. Are you willing to do this? We. Zhen Hua and Baisugu gritted their teeth and said, we are willing to use the soul accumulation talisman. Ha. Xiao Hua laughed heartily. He clapped his hands and put the accumulating spirit talisman into his bag. He laughed and said, since you don't want to use it, then don't use it. You don't have to force it. With your martial uncle Xiao overseeing this place, who can stop the 2 of you from reaching foundation establishment? Go. As Xiao Hua spoke, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the 2 by their necks. His figure flew up and flew toward 2 mountain peaks not too far away. Xiao Hua. Zhang Exin called out from behind. Let them use the accumulating spirit talisman. If they attract sword cultivators, we won't be able to keep our lives. Senior Martial Brother Zhang, if you're scared, feel free to leave. Xiao Hua joked as he flew. I have a junior who wants to build his foundation, how can I not look after him? Whoever dares to disturb the foundation establishment of my Imperial Thundersect's disciples, I'll kill whoever comes, kill whoever comes. Ha. Blast, let's go. How could Zhang Exin leave? With a wave of his hand, the disciples of the Utopia faction led Cui Hongshan and the others to chase after Xiao Hua. The disciples of the Utopia faction were a little embarrassed. They felt that Xiao Hua was too accommodating to Zhen Hua and Baisugu. After all, they still had 2 accumulating spirit talismans. It wouldn't be too late for them to build their foundation after flying for a few days and greeting the cultivators of the Sky Patrol City. Now that they were building their foundation here, it was definitely a big bait. If they didn't attract sword cultivators, it would be absolutely impossible. At the thought of these 2 absolutes, the disciples of the Utopia faction gritted their teeth in hatred. Instead of accompanying 2 chi-refining disciples to build their foundation here and meeting sword cultivators, it would be better to go to Mount Quanjin to pick up more magic weapons and snatch more magic weapons from sword cultivators. Although Xiao Hua suppressed his flying speed, he was still faster than the others. By the time Zhang Exin and the others arrived at the mountain peak, Xiao Hua had already made arrangements for Zhen Hua. He then brought Baisu Valley to another mountain peak. Junior brother Xiao, I'll accompany you to look after this disciple. How about letting the other disciples and junior brother Cui go over there to look after the other disciples? Zhang Exin saw that Xiao Hua could fly so fast after being injured, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He only knew that Xiao Hua had infinite strength. That's good. Xiao Hua looked at Zhen Hua, who was only 200 feet away from him, and nodded. And the others take. Zhang Exin was just about to instruct when Xiao Hua smiled and said, how about this, fellow cultivator Cui and the others? Stay here and ask the disciples of the Utopia faction to look after them. Thank you. Zhang Exin nodded and turned to instruct. You and the others go over. Although the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect are only in the foundation establishment stage, they are also the heroes of Jinshan Quan. You and the others have to protect them even if you have to give up your lives. Otherwise, we'll be ashamed of them who escaped from death. Senior brother, a disciple of the foundation establishment stage, said unhappily, we're here to patrol Jinshan Quan. If we were to escort the fellow cultivator of the Imperial Thunder Sect back to the Sky Patrol City, then it's our duty. We wouldn't dare to decline. But, he wants to build his foundation, there's an 80 to 90% chance that he'll attract sword cultivators. Can't guarantee. Humph. Zhang Xian's face turned cold and was about to scold. Xiaohua smiled and said, "Junior brothers, just go over. Let the juniors of my family have peace of mind. You don't have to care about other things." Zhang Xian was stunned. He glanced at Xiaohua and thought that Xiaohua was giving him a way out. He turned to scold, "Why aren't you going? Don't worry if there are sword cultivators attacking us, how can the other cultivators not care? It's not like there's no one here. The number of cultivators is not less than the number of swordsmen." "Yes." The disciples of the Utopia faction answered and turned to fly to the mountain where Zhenhua was. However, from their feeble answers, it was obvious that they were not happy. "Junior brother Xiao, please excuse us." Zhang Xian smiled apologetically. "When we return to the Sky Patrol City, I'll teach them a lesson." "Don't mention it." Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, "This is human nature. If they're excited and can't wait, I'll be worried." "Ah, junior brother Xiao is still so interesting. No wonder. Hongxia Fairy favors you." Zhang Xian laughed. At this time on the two mountain peaks, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth began to gather. Zhenhua and Baisu Valley's divine thought gradually released. The pressure of the cultivators of the foundation establishment stage gradually grew stronger and gradually spread to the surroundings with the two mountain peaks as the center. Not bad." Zhang Xian saw the situation and said softly, "Junior brother Xiao, the foundation of these two juniors of yours is excellent. The power of the foundation establishment stage is very strong. They're the best among the disciples of the foundation establishment stage that I have seen." "They're the best among the best?" Xiaohua secretly curled his lips. Compared to him, the movement of the foundation establishment stage was really not worth mentioning. However, he still smiled and nodded with the demeanor of an elder. "Yes, these two disciples' foundation is very good. It's just that they haven't had the opportunity to build their foundation establishment stage. Therefore, when they saw the condensation of true essence, they were ecstatic and wanted to build their foundation establishment stage." "It's understandable." Zhang Xian nodded. "Back then we fought to the death in the Feather Immortal Assembly, wasn't it because we wanted to build our foundation establishment stage? Junior brother Xiao didn't build his foundation establishment stage, but he also obtained a treasure and even accidentally obtained a beauty's heart. I really didn't get anything. After returning to the sect for a long time, I barely built my foundation establishment stage. To tell you the truth, I had the same thoughts as these two young friends at that time. I was ecstatic and hurriedly took the foundation establishment pill without caring about anything else. What divine accumulation pill! What great perfection of qi refinement! Let them go to hell." "Ha." Xiaohua also laughed. "You're lucky. I actually failed to build my foundation establishment stage for the first time, and it took me a long time to build my foundation establishment stage for the second time. Therefore, when I saw these two juniors in a hurry to build their foundation establishment stage, I empathized with them and did my best to help them build their foundation establishment stage." "Yes." Zhang Xian nodded, but he still said, "It's just that these two juniors' luck is a bit bad. This is not a good place, and there are many disciples who were building their foundation establishment stage who died in the hands of sword cultivators. It's better for us to be careful." "Yes, I understand. Actually, we should have put the two of them together." Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhenhua in the distance and the disciples of the Utopia faction sitting cross-legged next to him. "If we separated them, they wouldn't affect each other, but if there were swordsmen attacking, it would be a bit difficult." "Yes, I know." Xiaohua still didn't express his opinion. Seeing that Xiaohua had said so, Zhang Xian didn't say anything more. He released his divine thought and carefully took precautions. Zhenhua and Baisu Gu suddenly building their foundation establishment stage made Xiaohua very surprised. After all, they had been in a coma for the past 5 years. What made him even more puzzled was that Cui Hongshen, Zhen Minghui, Su Qing and Qiu Su also wanted to interfere. They actually sat there and started to circulate their heart sutras slowly. Damn it, can't they circulate their heart sutras? Why do they have to do it here? Isn't this snatching the spiritual qi from the foundation establishment stage disciples? Xiaohua despised Cui Hongshen. Even though there were 4 foundation establishment stage cultivators here and the 4 of them only carefully absorbed a small amount of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Zhenhua and Baisu Gu's foundation establishment stage phenomenon indeed attracted the attention of the crowd. Some cultivators rushed over happily. When they scanned with their divine thought, they found out that it was two juniors building their foundation establishment stage. They were disappointed but also helpless. Those with good self-restraint turned around and left. Those with bad self-restraint cursed a few words in the air and even spat. Of course, they wouldn't interfere with the two's foundation establishment stage. After all, they were all sword cultivators of the Dao faction. They still understood this principle. If the cultivators came, would the swordsmen be far away? Immediately, several swordsmen came together. Of course, when they saw that the two disciples building their foundation establishment stage were guarded by several foundation establishment stage cultivators, although they had malicious intentions, they also resentfully turned around and left. Instead of wasting time here, it would be better to quickly find a flying sword. Chapter 2379. Unfortunately, after the time it took to finish a meal, Zhenhua and Baisu Valley's good luck came to an end. From the direction of Quanjin Mountain, there were about 20 third-grade swordsmen with their swords drawn. Their faces were filled with panic as they hurriedly flew over. While flying, they kept looking behind them. When one of them saw the phenomenon of Zhenhua and Baisu Valley's foundation building, he was overjoyed and hurriedly transmitted his voice to the other swordsmen. Those 20 swordsmen excitedly flew over. Not good. When these swordsmen flew closer, Zhang Exin noticed and hurriedly shouted, "Junior brother Cui, have you all adjusted your breath? There are 20 swordsmen coming over." Xiaohua had already seen them and didn't care at all. Seeing Zhang Exin's panic, he smiled and said, "No need to delay these people's cultivation. It's rare for them to be so hardworking. Senior brother Zhang, you go over there and stay with the fellow cultivators from the Utopia faction." Zhang Exin was somewhat hesitant. Xiaohua was still smiling. "Senior brother Zhang, it's better to stay with your own disciples. Otherwise, if there's any mishap, you won't be able to explain it to the assembly hall." Right. Zhang Exin knew that Xiaohua's words were reasonable and said in a low voice, "If junior brother Xiao feels that something is wrong, quickly bring the disciples over. With us together we won't be afraid of them." "I know." Xiaohua nodded. After Zhang Exin flew over, Xiaohua turned to look at the place where the swordsman flew. It was less than 3 miles away. At this time Cui Hongshan stood up from the ground and frowned. 20 swordsmen, it's a bit tricky. And you'd better cultivate diligently." Xiaohua said sarcastically, "There's someone building foundation here. The spiritual energy here is very rich." Cui Hongshan didn't expect Xiaohua to look at him like this and was slightly angry. However, he didn't bother to explain to Xiaohua. Junior brother Xiao." Zhen Minghui also stood up and said happily, "I'm afraid you've misunderstood Captain Cui." "What did I misunderstand?" Xiaohua naturally wouldn't admit it. I'll let junior brother Xiao know." Zhen Minghui said in a low voice, "I just checked my meridians and heart technique. I'm not talented. Although I don't have any impression of these 5 years, but these 5 years are worth 10 years of hard cultivation." "What?" Xiaohua was extremely surprised. He knocked out the 6 of them and threw them into the space. He didn't expect that as soon as they came out, 2 of them were about to enter the foundation establishment realm and 4 of them had made great progress in their cultivation. What had his space become? On the other side, Su Qing and Qiu Su stood up as well. Similarly, their faces lit up with joy. They smiled and said, "That's right, we've also checked. Our cultivation has indeed improved. We know that if we cultivate diligently for a few years or even less than a year, we will be able to step into the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage." Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and looked at Cui Hongshan. "I don't know." Cui Hongshan replied indifferently, "Whether or not it is love." Xiaohua curled his lips. "This Xiao is too lazy to care. What about you, junior brother Xiao?" Su Qing blinked and asked, "Don't tell me you didn't make any progress?" "Me? Of course I do." Xiaohua also couldn't deny it. Then he rolled his eyes and said with a profound look, "Just now this Xiao thought about it. I thought it was just this Xiao's own situation and didn't dare to ask you. I reckon it might be because we were inside the restriction. Although that spiritual hull couldn't attack us, but the spiritual chi of heaven and earth could also seep into the restriction of the Great Formation. Although we were unconscious, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth still entered our meridians and pushed our cultivation. That's right, that's right. Fear appeared on Jin Minghui's face. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth could actually rush into a person's meridians and cause a swordsman's body to explode. It could definitely pass through the restriction of the formation and enter our meridians. Fortunately, there was a great formation that blocked the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, otherwise we would have already turned into ashes. Seeing that Jin Minghui was able to lie so perfectly, Xiaohua felt proud in his heart. While everyone was talking, the 20 sword cultivators had already flown to the center of the mountain with bared fangs and brandished claws. They scanned with their divine senses and stopped again. Their faces were filled with shame and anger, knowing that they had pounced on empty air. But immediately, these sword cultivators discussed a little, and with a sinister smile on their faces, they all pounced towards Xiaohua's side. After all, the number of people on Xiaohua's side was small. Can you still face the enemy? Xiaohua turned his head and asked, if you can't, then just stay here. Our meridians are only slightly torn, it's nothing. Why can't we face the enemy? Cui Hongshan knew Xiaohua's ability, but now that his cultivation had improved greatly, his heart was jumping with joy. He didn't want Xiaohua to monopolize the limelight. Alright, then this Xiao won't stop you. Xiaohua stretched and said, however, this Xiao will need the time to drink a cup of tea to kill these sword cultivators. During this time I won't have time to take care of you. Good boy, only the time to drink a cup of tea. Su Qing secretly stuck out her tongue. I know. We are not 3-year-old children. Cui Hongshan secretly laughed at Xiaohua's showing off. Alright. At this time, those sword cultivators were less than 100 feet away from Xiaohua and the others. 20 flying swords had already flown over. Xiaohua and the others each had a flying sword aimed at them, and the remaining 10 or so flying swords were actually aimed at Baisu Valley. Baisu Valley's divine sense was released and had long seen it clearly. He couldn't help but feel a little unstable. I'm here, what are you afraid of? Xiaohua had been keeping his Buddhist consciousness near Baisu Valley. Seeing the speed of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth flowing into his body slow down, he knew something was wrong. With a loud shout, his figure suddenly rushed towards the sword cultivators. And as Xiaohua flew out of the mountain peak, the cloud-suppressing seal was summoned by Xiaohua. Once the cloud-suppressing seal came out of the space, it immediately became 10 feet in size. However, Xiaohua controlled the cloud-suppressing seal and didn't absorb too much spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Attack! Xiaohua roared and pointed his finger. The cloud-suppressing seal whistled and flew towards the 20 or so flying swords attacking. A powerful confining force gushed out from the cloud-suppressing seal. Many sword cultivators felt as if their flying swords were being grasped by a pair of big hands, forcibly trying to break free from their control. The sword cultivators were greatly alarmed. They hurriedly formed a sword art and urged their sword origin, wanting to snatch their flying swords out of this unremarkable magic weapon. But at this moment, the sword cultivators only saw a golden light flash before their eyes. Immediately after, a series of blood-curdling screams rang out. Far away on another mountain peak, Zhang Exen was abnormally anxious. When he saw that there were 20 li of sword cultivators, he already wanted to combine the disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction and the Imperial Thunder faction to fight the enemy together. Therefore, when he flew away, he specially warned Xiaohua. When he saw the 20 or so swordsmen rushing towards Xiaohua, he felt lucky in his heart but didn't dare to move. He was afraid that he would fall for the sword cultivator's trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Instead, he hoped that Xiaohua would quickly bring Baisu Valley and the others over. But who knew that Xiaohua actually had the leisure to chat with Cui Hongshan and the others over there? In an instant, it expanded to over 30 meters in size, and smashed towards the dozen or so sword cultivators at a speed that was several times faster than before. Another incomparably valiant confinement force enveloped these sword cultivators. Fall, Xiaohua softly rebuked 3 times in a row. 3 streaks of bronze clouds fell from the cloud-suppressing seal, rapidly enveloping the dozen or so sword cultivators. And just as Xiaohua was chanting an incantation, his figure suddenly swayed. With lightning speed, he broke away from the attack range of the dozen or so flying swords. The flying sword closest to him practically brushed past his ear as it flew away. Fall. Xiao Hua's expression didn't change in the slightest. He pointed his hand towards the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal that was always half a beat slower now smashed down like a boulder. With a boom, it simultaneously smashed into the bodies of the dozen or so sword cultivators that were already confined by the cloud-suppressing seal in midair. The sword cultivators' protective sword auras flickered extremely brightly, but they still couldn't compare to the brilliance of the cloud-suppressing seal. With just one touch, the dozen or so sword cultivators around the 4th grade were all smashed into meat paste falling from midair. At this moment Xiao Hua seemed to be even busier than before. With a wave of his hand, the dozen or so flying swords that had just flown past him fell into his hand. With a wave of his hand he stored them into his space. Immediately after he didn't stop to rest. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he flew into midair and also collected the storage pouches of the dozen or so sword cultivators. Only then did he clap his hands and return once again. And at this time, the sword cultivators that were preparing to kill Cui Hongshan and the other 3 had just begun to exchange blows with Cui Hongshan and the others. Zhang Exin was really dumbstruck. His body swayed and he nearly fell from midair. This is a sword cultivator whose strength is comparable to that of the Foundation establishment stage. After being in a coma for 5 years, not only did he become the hero of the Battle of Mount Quanjin, his cultivation also increased greatly. Who wouldn't be jealous after hearing this? And it's exactly so. Xiao Hua smiled and released his pressure. And this pressure was already close to the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. Of course. Xiao Hua immediately retracted his pressure. But Zhang Exin could clearly sense that he was about to enter the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He couldn't help but feel bitter in his mouth and cupped his hands and said, "Congratulations, junior brother Xiao." Ah, this Xiao's few senior brothers are also the same. Xiao Hua smiled and waved his hand. "And congratulations, Captain Cui." Zhang Exin turned to congratulate Cui Hongshan and the others. "If you're lying." Cui Hongshan despised Xiao Hua in his heart. "You didn't even kill the sword cultivator that escaped from this daddy's subordinates. This is clearly cutting off this daddy's face." However, he could only smile and return the greeting with a bow, saying, "I was lucky." After another hour, Zhen Hua and Bai Sugu's Foundation establishment stage finally came to an end. Those blind sword cultivators finally didn't come looking for trouble. However, Xiao Hua was a little unhappy and muttered to himself, "Damn it, with such a big Foundation establishment stage movement, how could no one come to deliver a storage pouch? You really made this daddy worry for nothing." Seeing that Zhen Hua and Bai Sugu had retracted their divine wills, the pressure of the early Foundation establishment stage also gradually receded. The surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth also gradually dissipated. At this moment the sky also darkened. Above the horizon the stars were shining brightly, each guarding a corner of the horizon, decorating the night sky. The twinkling starlight was like everyone's unconcealable joy. "Congratulations, junior brother Bai." Xiao Hua looked at Bai Sugu with a smile and said. Bai Sugu couldn't hide the joy on his face. He bit his lips slightly and bowed, "I dare not. In front of Uncle Xiao I'll always be a junior. If Uncle Xiao didn't show off your invincible power just now, how could I build my Foundation establishment stage? Junior thanks Martial Uncle Xiao." "Ah, there's no need. You still have to thank the senior brothers who built their Foundation establishment stage. Since you've built your Foundation establishment stage, you have to leave the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect and return to the Imperial Thunder Sect. This battle's life and death has nothing to do with you." Xiao Hua laughed. "Next I'll send you back to Sky Patrol City safely and everything will be fine." "Yes, I understand. I'll remember Uncle Zhao's great kindness in my heart," Bai Sugu said respectfully, then turned to thank Cui Hongshan and the others. At this moment, Zhenhua also flew over and kowtowed to thank him. The disciples of the Utopia faction stood slightly further away, their eyes filled with respect, and there was no longer the previous neglect and dissatisfaction. Chapter 2381. When Zhenhua and Bai Sugu finished thanking Xiao Hua took out the storage bags of more than 10 sword cultivators. He took out less than half of the items, including 10 flying swords of average quality, and handed them to Zhen Minghui and said, These are for everyone, you can distribute them. Zhenhua and Baisugu should take a little more, after all they won't have a chance in the future. Yes, I know. Zhen Minghui understood Xiaohua's meaning and divided the items into more than 10 portions. Not only did the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect get one, but also the disciples of the Utopia faction. I'm sorry. Zhang Exin was obviously surprised. After all, these items were the work of Xiaohua, who killed the sword cultivators single-handedly. It was reasonable to say that they belonged to him, so he didn't have to distribute them. Haha, senior brother Zhang, please take them. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, this is the rule of the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. It was set before we entered the Sky Patrol City, so I can't disobey it. If this guy still cares about the rules. Cui Hongshan muttered in his heart. He didn't want to take them, but after hearing Xiaohua's words, he took out his storage bag and put the items in it. Then, it would be impolite of me to refuse. Zhang Exin looked at the several eager disciples beside him and accepted them with a smile. The disciples beside him were also delighted. They took the items and the flying swords and put them in their storage bags. Although they had a lot of magic weapons and flying swords in their storage bags, they had to be handed over. If they were discovered by the conference hall, it would be a big crime. What Xiaohua took out was less than half of the items in the storage bags. It was a lot for each disciple. How could they not be happy? Should we go back now? Or rest for the night? Zhang Exin looked at the night sky and asked Xiaohua's opinion. Xiaohua looked at Cui Hongshan, who was looking at the bright moonlight, and said with a smile, let's hurry back to the Sky Patrol City. The sooner we get back, the sooner I can rest assured. Alright, that's what I'm thinking too. Zhang Exin naturally agreed. Then, the Utopia faction and the Thunder Control faction set off for the Sky Patrol City in a group of more than 10 people. After flying for several hours, they saw the city guards of the Sky Patrol City and the Taoist sect cultivators sent by the conference hall. They were naturally extremely surprised that Xiaohua and the others were still alive. However, their mission this time was to snatch the magic treasures and flying swords, so they only hurriedly saw them and continued on their way. Just like the few Sky Patrol City's city guards that Zhang Exin had found earlier, they were in a hurry. Seeing that dawn was about to break in the east, a wisp of light emerged from the horizon. Everyone flew to a dangerous place. The winds here were biting cold and the foothills were steep. From time to time, a foul stench would drift into their noses from afar. Even though everyone was flying high up in the air, they still frowned. Suddenly, Xiaohua, who was flying in the middle, frowned and said urgently, stop. Junior brother Xiao, did you find something wrong? Zhang Exin, who was standing next to him, stopped the disciples of the Utopia faction flying in front of him immediately. Nothing, it seems like someone is here to deliver the storage bag again. Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked at the foothills a few miles ahead. The foothills were covered in snow and were very high, almost under everyone's feet. There are swordsmen ambushing us. Zhang Exin raised his eyebrows and suddenly realized something. He said hurriedly, these swordsmen have learned to be cunning and often set up ambushes on the path that we cultivators must pass through. Many cultivators have fallen into their trap. These swordsmen probably know that the cultivators of the Sky Patrol City are heading to Mount Quanjin, so they set up an ambush here. Previously there were too many cultivators, so they didn't dare to attack. If we go over, I'm afraid we'll be attacked. How many swordsmen are there? Should we take a detour? Zhen Minghui released his divine thought and looked around. He couldn't find anything strange, so he asked in a low voice. Haha, why should we take a detour? Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said, you wait here for a while, I'll be back soon. Junior brother Xiao. Zhang Exin said, according to what I know, the swordsmen who set up the ambush range from dozens to hundreds. They're all used to working together and there are even sword formations. Junior brother is brave, but there's no need to take the risk for those storage bags. Hundreds? Haha, it's only hundreds. This guy has sent thousands of swordsmen in and out, so why would he be afraid of this? Cui Hongshan secretly curled his lips, knowing that Xiaohua would definitely go. Sure enough, Xiaohua smiled and said, it's okay. I'll go take a look. If it really doesn't work, it's not too late to escape. Alright. Seeing that Cui Hongshan and the rest didn't stop him, Zhang Exin felt strange and said, we'll go too. If we're too far away, we won't be able to save each other in time if something happens. Good. Xiaohua thought about it and agreed. He waved his hand and said, all of you follow behind this Xiao. Don't go more than 10 feet. Then Xiaohua took the lead and flew forward unhurriedly. He even stopped as he flew, and his divine sense swept over the foothills again and again, as if he was really scouting the way. When Xiaohua flew to the front of a foothill, he stopped and didn't fly forward anymore. Instead, he slapped his hand and took out the cloud-suppressing seal, which buzzed and protected himself. Then he moved forward with ease. However, Xiaohua had only flown a few feet when the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly smashed into the foothill about 1 zhang behind him. On the foothill, a thick layer of snow covered a few pine trees. Haha, you still want to play this game with me? Xiaohua laughed, and the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly enlarged to the size of several zhang. With a loud rumble, the cloud-suppressing seal smashed into the pine tree. Under the yellow light, all the illusions were destroyed. A pale white light flickered, revealing more than 10 flying swords in a disorderly fashion. Under the flying swords, there were dozens of 4th or 5th grade swordsmen. The pitiful dozen or so sword xiu who wanted to wait for Zhang Xin, Cui Hongshan and the others to fall into the ambush before attacking, now had a pale golden color on their faces. They were all lying crookedly on the foot of the mountain. Their gazes were fixed on Cui Hongshan and the others. They had already let go of Xiaohua, who was carefully exploring the path. But they didn't expect that Xiaohua would actually turn around and throw out that inconspicuous magic weapon. That inconspicuous magic weapon was just as unexpected as Xiaohua's. It was unimaginably heavy, and that mountain-like attack instantly destroyed the formation they had covered up with great difficulty. Not only that, their flying swords suffered a heavy blow, and their primordial spirits were also shaken. Hit! Xiaohua laughed loudly and no longer moved forward. He pointed his finger without any trace of politeness. The cloud-suppressing seal rose up slightly and then suddenly pressed down. The group of swordsmen became anxious and tried their best to circulate their sword energy. While their bodies flew in all directions, their flying swords rushed towards the cloud-suppressing seal, trying to stop it from pressing down. Unfortunately, Xiaohua had been forced to cultivate bitterly for 5 years and had already reached the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment. That kind of magical power was simply unimaginable to them. How could they block it with their flying swords? That was simply a fool's dream. Chapter 2382. Crack, crack, crack. When the 2 flying swords collided with the cloud-suppressing seal, the tips of the swords immediately broke. The broken swords fell to the ground, and the masters of the flying swords also spat out a mouthful of blood. Their rapidly flying figures fell dispirited on the foothills. When the rest of the swordsmen saw this, they couldn't help but be even more shocked. They hurriedly turned their flying swords around. How could they still dare to come into contact with Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal? Still want to leave? Xiaohua sneered. He pointed his hand and the cloud-suppressing seal let out a buzzing sound again. A cloud fell from above, covering the dozen or so swordsmen who wanted to escape. Go! Xiaohua raised his eyebrows, looking at the foothills not far away. The cloud-suppressing seal fell again. He didn't believe that if he smashed these swordsmen to death, their fellow apprentices wouldn't come to rescue them. Sure enough, when Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal slowly smashed on top of the cloud, the mountain rocks not far away shook. Suddenly 20 or so swordsmen appeared. Their faces were alarmed and each of them urged their flying swords. Those flying swords formed a slightly larger sword formation and rushed towards Xiaohua. Haha, Xiaohua saw another 20 or so flying swords and he beamed with joy. Just as he was about to release the soaring dragon shears, a swift and fierce sword chi suddenly rushed out from 3 feet below Xiaohua's body, directly stabbing towards Xiaohua's leg. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. His divine sense very naturally swept over, but the sword chi's origin was empty. There was nothing wrong with it. What's going on? Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly urged his body, relying on his superb flying technique to dodge. Go! Xiaohua sensed that the sword chi had disappeared. His eyes turned slightly and he pointed with his finger. He didn't care about the sealed sword technique, and the cloud-suppressing seal swayed again, meeting the simple sword formation that was hastily formed. Rumble! There was another loud sound. The sword formation formed by 20 or so flying swords finally collided with the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal was actually somewhat crooked and was pushed to the side. Xiaohua's body also slightly swayed. Suddenly, the swift and fierce sword qi from just now appeared again, and it was again within 2 feet. And at this time, the sword qi had already approached Xiaohua's neck. Formless sword. At this point, seeing that there was still no change in his divine sense, Xiaohua came to a realization no matter how stupid he was. However, Xiaohua wasn't shocked but delighted instead. He waved his hand and was about to execute the heaven and earth sleeve technique to envelop the sword qi. However, just as he turned around, his eyes turned again. His body moved swiftly and flew up slightly, approaching the cloud-suppressing seal. At this time, more than a dozen swordsmen appeared from other places and flew towards Cui Hongshan and the others. The 20 or so swordsmen who were blocking Xiaohua once again urged their sword energy to organize the chaotic flying swords and attack Xiaohua. That invisible sword once again disappeared from the sky. Xiaohua swept out with his Buddhist consciousness, but he still couldn't find any clues. Very good. Xiaohua secretly rejoiced in his heart. Then he stealthily opened his left hand. Within his Dharma eye, a faint blue brilliance appeared so unique among the numerous dim sword lights. At this moment, the light blue brilliance once again landed below Xiaohua. Ayaya, Xiaohua's face revealed panic. While urging the cloud-suppressing seal to block the attacks of the 20 swordsmen, he dodged the invisible sword below him. The invisible sword was indeed strange. Seeing that Xiaohua was in a very difficult situation, it immediately gave up its previous sneak attack and actually began to aimlessly attack Xiaohua's surroundings. If Xiaohua wasn't able to see it with his Dharma eye, he would really be somewhat exhausted to deal with it. Good, now is the time. Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal was once again hit by the flying swords of a group of sword cultivators. His figure was forced to fall. The invisible sword once again stabbed towards him, but the sword qi still hadn't appeared and was still 4 feet away. Don't hurt my Taoist disciple, I'm coming. Right at this moment, a voice that Xiaohua was very familiar with resounded, and then a golden light that shot into the sky flew over from afar like a golden dragon. Although that golden light hadn't yet come close, that fierce baleful aura and the sound of wind tearing through the void could be heard. Ah? Li Zongbao. Xiaohua's divine sense swept and was immediately overjoyed. After the golden light, wasn't it precisely the snow-haired Li Zongbao? Oh, Xiaohua. Li Zongbao released the immortal piercing whip and naturally also swept out with his divine sense. Seeing that Xiaohua's face hadn't changed in the slightest, he was also slightly stunned. He didn't expect that a Foundation establishment cultivator who relied on a magic treasure to resist 20 drawing sword swordsmen would actually be the first-level qi refining cultivator he saw before. Xiaohua's slight distraction allowed the invisible sword to come within a foot of him. The sword qi flashed and was about to pierce Xiaohua's heart. Li Zongbao also turned pale with fright. He also didn't discover the invisible sword. However, he was really far away. Even if he reminded or used the immortal piercing whip to save him, he couldn't do it. Just as Li Zongbao was regretting in his heart, he saw Xiaohua calmly raise his left hand slightly. At the same time, a golden light not inferior to the immortal piercing whip flashed out from Xiaohua's right hand. That golden light flashed away and a bamboo leaf-like jade sword appeared. It fell between Xiaohua's left thumb and index finger. Oh! Immediately after, a sound of astonishment rang out. Not even 2 feet in front of Xiaohua, a petite swordswoman with a drawn sword appeared. Her dainty face was filled with absolute disbelief as she looked at Xiaohua, and her eyes were filled with pain. Because a jade-like soft hand and a lotus root-like arm were currently holding the bamboo leaf-like jade sword, and blood had just seeped out of her arm. Ouch! Seeing the female cultivator appear, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel regret in his heart. He brushed his hand and a Wu Tsong pill appeared in his hand. With a flick of his hand, the Wu Tsong pill was easily sent into the swordsman's mouth. When he did this as smoothly as moving clouds and flowing water, he himself was a bit astonished. Granny, when did this young master have such tender feelings for the fairer sex? I forget it. Who told this young master to be a man? Xiaohua couldn't help but secretly find an excuse for his actions. Once the Wu Tsong pill entered the female swordsman's mouth, It immediately turned into a liquid that flowed down the woman's throat. The woman's almond eyes turned vertical, shocked and angry. She clearly resented Xiao Hua for using poison again. Just as she was about to circulate her energy to force the medicinal liquid out, she saw Xiao Hua send the invisible sword in front of her eyes again. He said indifferently, "Still not taking it?" "This." The woman was slightly stunned. The medicinal liquid of the Wu Song pill had already entered her stomach. Although the woman didn't know what kind of pill Xiao Hua gave her, she could still distinguish the medicinal fragrance of the Wu Song pill. It was clearly a kind of healing pill. Seeing the invisible sword being sent back, the woman naturally raised her hand and used her uninjured left hand to receive it. Her mind didn't have any thoughts at all. Just as Xiao Hua was showing tender feelings for the fairer sex, Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip had already landed near the 20-sword swordsman. The whip's shadow flickered and turned into 20 rays of light that hit the swordsman's body. Puff puff, a series of light sounds could be heard. Many swordsmen's body flashed with sword rays, and their figures were all crooked and couldn't stand steadily in midair. After all, Li Zongbao was far from being a sword cultivator, and he had split into 20 whip shadows to attack the 20-sword swordsman at the same time. Moreover, he didn't have the piercing immortal whip in his hand, so the might of this magic weapon couldn't be fully displayed. Instead, it was blocked by the swordsman's attack. Seeing that Xiao Hua alone was enough to make everyone drink a pot of water, and even the woman's own arm had been chopped off, and this was another white-haired cultivator she had heard of before, the woman shouted without hesitation. She was the first to circulate her sword origin, and her figure disappeared in midair. "Want to go? Then you have to leave behind your flying swords." Xiao Hua very naturally returned the invisible sword to the woman and immediately regretted it. Hearing the woman's shout to retreat, he immediately laughed and circulated the cloud-suppressing seal. Those 20 flying swords were firmly suppressed by him, and those swordsmen simply couldn't move. "Want to go? Quickly hand over your life." At this time, Li Zongbao had already flown over. He had already seen Xiao Hua's action of returning the swords, but his face was cold, without any expression. He, Xiao Hua embarrassedly laughed again and put away the cloud-suppressing seal. He smiled apologetically and said, "Senior Brother Li, you should take a look. Isn't this the junk I obtained at the Taiching Sect's Feather Immortal Assembly? How can it compare to Senior Brother's magic treasure?" Li Zongbao curled his lips. If it was someone else, he definitely wouldn't say anything, but Xiao Hua was different from others. "This magic treasure has been repaired quite a bit and its power is close to that of my immortal whip." Just now, what was the magic treasure you used to cut that woman in half?" This poor Taoist actually didn't see it clearly. Chapter 2383. Alas, Xiao Hua took out the Tingjiao scissors with a bitter face and said, "I only have some junk here. How can it be compared to Brother Li's fairy-piercing whip?" Seeing that there was only half a Tingjiao scissors, Li Zongbao smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if it's complete or not as long as it can be used. You cut off the arm of Guyu, the shapeless sword. If word got out, everyone would be envious." This is nothing." Xiao Hua put away his magic weapon. At this time, Zhang Exin and the other disciples of the Utopia faction came over and bowed. "Greetings, Brother Li." Li Zongbao's face was cold and his attitude was different from Xiao Hua's. He asked, "Why are you here?" Zhang Exin was not surprised and quickly reported the cause of the matter. "Oh, you actually escaped from the Battle of Jingquan Mountain?" Li Zongbao glanced at Xiao Hua. "And it seems like that's the case." Xiao Hua rubbed his nose, looking somewhat baffled. Seeing Li Zongbao's surprise, Zhang Exin smiled bitterly. Almost all the cultivators in the Sky Patrol City knew that the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect had fallen because only 7 people from the Imperial Thunder Sect died. And Li Zongbao did not know about this. It seemed that Li Zongbao did not care about the situation of the battle. After Zhang Exin finished his report, Cui Hongshan and the others also came over. Zhen Minghui collected the storage pouches of the 20 or so swordsmen, as well as the 10 or so flying swords that Xiao Hua had knocked down, and handed them over to Xiao Hua. "No, this is Brother Li's." Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and asked Zhen Minghui to give the storage bag to Li Zongbao. "I don't want it." Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, "These things are useless to me." Then he looked at Xiaohua and said, "If you like it, take it yourself." He great. Xiaohua took the storage bag and said happily, "Thank you, brother Li. Don't mention it, it was originally yours." Li Zongbao said lightly. Immediately, Cui Hongshan and the others came to meet him. They saw that Li Zongbao was powerful and knew that he was a famous disciple of the Utopia faction. After listening to Zhang Xian's introduction, they admired him even more. Li Zongbao's reputation was extremely famous in the Three Kingdoms. Even Cui Hongshan had regarded Li Zongbao as his goal. Or rather, he was Tu Hong's idol before he met him. At the side, Zhang Xian also introduced proudly, "My senior brother Li's magic power is now boundless. People call him the #1 person below the Aura's core stage." However, these were words that he was used to saying. At this moment he stopped halfway and naturally looked at Xiaohua. Even Cui Hongshan, Zhen Minghui and the others had some thoughts. Li Zongbao was keenly aware of this. He glanced at Xiaohua and said faintly, "Zhang Xian, that's other people's false praise. How can you take it seriously? Didn't you see junior brother Xiao? You can deal with 20 bright swordsmen with ease. You're much more powerful than me." "Tisk, senior brother Li, don't flatter me." Xiaohua retorted bluntly, "That's because little brother's Dharma treasure is powerful. Little brother, I don't believe that if you wave your immortal piercing whip, they will still have a physiological reaction." And Li Zongbao did not refute. He knew that if he was any closer, the lives of those bright swordsmen might not have been saved. In the 5 or 6 years since the beginning of the war, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had already reached the late stage of foundation establishment. Although he had not reached the peak, he was worthy of being called the #1 person below the Aura's core stage. Just like before, Xiaohua kept most of the things for himself and distributed a small portion to everyone. Li Zongbao looked at Xiaohua with interest and asked faintly, "Xiaohua, are you going back to Sky Patrol City now?" "Yes, where else can we go if not back to Sky Patrol City?" Xiaohua was slightly stunned and kept the storage bag and other things. Once we return to Sky Patrol City, the flying sword and storage bag will not come back." Li Zongbao narrowed his eyes and said, "Are you interested in going with me?" "Where to?" Xiaohua blinked and asked. "I don't know where to go." Li Zongbao said, "However, I'm going to kill Qin Jian. Are you interested?" "Who is Qin Jian?" Xiaohua was puzzled, but then he suddenly realized that he should have heard of him in the tea house in Sky Patrol City. He smiled and said, "Is he the illusory swordsman?" "Yes, you must have heard of him." Li Zongbao nodded and pointed at Xiaohua. "I'm not his opponent. If I can get junior brother Zhao's help, I'll be able to make a contribution." "Good." Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "I'm willing to follow you." But then Xiaohua scratched his head and said, "Senior brother Li, I'm a disciple of the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to follow you, is it?" As long as you're willing, you can follow me now." Li Zongbao clapped his hands and took out a token with the appearance of a mountain peak. "What's this?" Xiaohua asked curiously. Li Zongbao said proudly, "This is the special token of the meeting hall of the True Path Sect's Yanxi Mansion. I have the right to order all True Path Sect disciples below the Aura's core stage to obey my orders." Wow, so powerful. Xiaohua could not help but be envious. Imperial Thunder Sect's Xiaohua. Li Zongbao's face tightened and he raised the token. "I want you to follow me now. Do you understand?" Disciple Xiaohua understands. Xiaohua did not dare to neglect and bowed. Then Li Zongbao looked at Cui Hongshan and said, "Fellow Taoist Cui, please take out the token of the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect." "Yes." Cui Hongshan's heart was bitter and he obediently took out the token. "And yours?" Li Zongbao turned to look at Xiaohua. "Oh no." Xiaohua also woke up at this time. If he followed Li Zongbao, what would Cui Hongshan and the others do? Although they were about to reach the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, they were still ants in a war. "Senior brother Li, can I not go?" Xiaohua said embarrassedly. Li Zongbao coldly glared at him and said, "The meeting hall's token is a command to cultivators. No one dares to disobey. If you don't go, just wait for the meeting hall to kill you." "But I'm a little reluctant to part with the Imperial Thunder Sect brothers." Xiaohua did not dare to say it out loud and explained tactfully. Li Zongbao said coldly, "They are the survivors of Quanjin Mountain. They have already been rewarded. Other than me, who else doesn't know? My Dao sect's 11 survivors of Quanjin Mountain have all returned to their respective sections. I'm afraid the 6 of them will not stay in Sky Patrol City for long. There's no need to talk about these 2 disciples who have just reached the Foundation establishment realm. Once they return to Sky Patrol City, they will be sent back to the Imperial Thunder Sect." "Oh, I see." Xiaohua heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. "All right then, I'm willing to follow Brother Li." Even Cui Hongshan has to admire us. Thinking of this, Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said, "Brother Li, isn't it a little tiring for us to fly like this? I have a flying device here, why don't we use it?" "You have a flying device?" Li Zongbao regained his indifference. "Why didn't you take it out earlier?" "Heh heh." Xiaohua clapped his hands and took out a small flying boat. He said with a smile, "This belongs to the Qiqiao sect. I was afraid that they would ask for it." "Well, there's no harm in using it in the future," Li Zongbao said as he stepped on it. "Just say it's a gift from me." "Damn it. Why is there such a big gap between people?" Xiaohua and Zhang Exian were puzzled. After boarding the flying boat, Xiaohua naturally controlled it. Li Zongbao sat cross-legged and had already entered a meditative state. Xiaohua was originally prepared to wait for Li Zongbao to ask about his experiences these past few years and why his cultivation had already reached the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Seeing that Li Zongbao didn't ask, he felt relieved. He controlled the flying boat while checking his cultivation for the past 5 years. Xiaohua's current constitution was of the earth attribute. The cultivation method he cultivated was also an ordinary cultivation method from the spirit husbandry sect. When he asked for the cultivation method from Zhang Qingshao at Yellowflower Ridge, he wanted to see if there was a chance to change his cultivation method. However, he didn't expect that in a short 10 years he would be forced to cultivate this cultivation method to the end. Now he was already at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. In a few years, as long as he cultivated normally, he should be able to condense his core according to the situation when he was refining his qi. However, when he thought about the strange state of his Foundation establishment realm, Xiaohua frowned. He really didn't know what kind of test he would face when he condensed his core. If there was a lightning tribulation, Xiaohua didn't dare to think about it anymore. His body trembled slightly. Maybe I should make some preparations for condensing my core. It was because of that damn 7-star sword formation that he was left in the great formation of Golden Spring Mountain. He was forced to cultivate bitterly for 5 years, and even the Phoenix celestial body benefited from it. In Xiaohua's understanding, the sword formation was either a cooperation between several people or set up by himself. Of course, if he set up the sword formation by himself, then the requirements of his divine sense and primordial spirit were extremely high. Even Xiaohua himself couldn't easily use it now. However, this sword pouch made up for this shortcoming. According to what was recorded in the sword scroll and Xiaohua's understanding, a swordsman only needed to refine the sword pouch, and then put the flying swords of the same quality into the sword pouch according to the arrangement of the sword formation. When facing the enemy, he only needed to open the sword pouch, and the flying swords would be arranged according to the arrangement of the sword formation. A swordsman controlling the sword formation through the sword pouch was much easier than directly using divine sense and primordial spirit to control the sword formation. Great! Xiaohua was overjoyed. If Li Zongbao wasn't present, he would definitely do a somersault on this flowing cloud-flying ship. His sword playing the world was to use 10,000 flying swords to conquer the world. Unfortunately, he could only split out 64 flying swords, and even after using his primordial spirit to control the flying swords, he still had some reservations and wasn't used to splitting out flying swords. Therefore, there was no need to mention the sword formation. Now, with this sword pouch and the flying swords transformed by Ling Yunwu and the other illusory swordsmen, wouldn't they be able to form the sword formation? Thinking, Xiaohua immediately took out the sword scroll and other items that he got from Golden Spring Mountain, and searched one by one to see if he could find the array of the 7-star sword formation. There really is one. Not long after, Xiaohua found a complete sword scroll. It was one of the sword scrolls that he picked up from the space of the Seven Stars Great Array. This young master knew that among these 10 swordsmen who set up the Great Array, there must be someone holding the sword scroll of the Great Array. Chapter 2385. Who? The wolf-headed man was furious. He threw away the leg bone in his hand and stood up. His wild gaze swept towards the source of the voice. Haha, it's actually 2 cultivators with soft skin and tender flesh. Aren't they just giving us a treat? The leopard-headed man swept with his divine sense and laughed loudly. His body didn't move at all. The wolf-headed man naturally also saw them. Seeing that they were only 2 cultivators around the middle stage of Foundation establishment, he sneered. In front of him were several cultivators who were being eaten raw. Which one of them wasn't stronger than them? Don't be careless. The pig-headed man hurriedly stood up and said, 2 Foundation establishment cultivators wouldn't have come here for no reason. Moreover, seeing us brothers here, they still dared to come here. They must have something to rely on. So what? The leopard-headed man sneered but still stood up. Nearby, more than a dozen valiant beast cultivators covered in blood also stood up and threw away the meat in their hands. Feeling their hands, they each picked up their own weapons from the ground. Their eyes revealed a fierce expression as they looked towards the source of the voice. Xiaohua, you only need to use the cloud-suppressing seal. You can only imprison as many as you can. On the flowing cloud-flying ship, Li Zongbao's voice was still calm as he instructed. My immortal piercing whip will follow your cloud-suppressing seal. Imprison as many as you imprison, I will kill as many as you kill. Good. Xiaohua couldn't compare to Li Zongbao's ruthlessness. His divine sense swept over, and the anger in his heart had already been ignited. Naturally, there were deaths on the battlefield and no one could blame anyone. However, the cruelty of the beast cultivators had long surpassed the scope of war. How could Xiaohua be merciful? Seeing that the dozen or so beast cultivators had also flown into the air and were about to surround them, Xiaohua clapped his hand. The cloud-suppressing seal rumbled and flew into the air. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal appeared, its ancient bronze brilliance greatly flourished. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth swarmed in, and rays of white jade condensed at the edge of the cloud-suppressing seal. Oh! Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal's might, Li Zongbao was also slightly shocked. Clearly, it had exceeded his expectations. Isn't it just a magic weapon? It's not like I haven't seen it before. The wolf-headed beast cultivator at the front sneered, his hoarse voice spreading far and wide. At the same time he waved his hand and a weapon that looked very similar to a wolf-tooth club appeared in the air. His body flew up, completely disproportionate to his enormous size. Go! The leopard-headed beast cultivator also waved its hand. 2 other ox-headed beast cultivators flew out from the encirclement and charged towards Xiaohua and Li Zongbao. It's actually a demonic weapon? Xiaohua's divine sense swept over and saw the wolf-tooth club in the wolf-headed beast cultivator's hand. He couldn't help but be slightly astonished and secretly said, this beast cultivator. When did he start using demonic tools? Soon after, Xiaohua sneered and said, Brother Li, it looks like these beast cultivators aren't fools. They actually know to separate and face the enemy. This little brother's cloud-suppressing seal might not be able to wipe out his mother in one go. However, it seems that the bold one is the leader. How about we kill these 4 beasts first? No problem. As long as you can imprison them, I will be able to kill them. Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip was already in his hand. Xiaohua's hand formed a seal, and the cloud-suppressing seal rapidly expanded. When it was about 10 zhang tall, it slightly trembled and a cloud fell down, smashing towards the wolf-headed beast cultivators. The wolf-headed beast cultivator held the wolf-tooth club in his hand. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal's terrifying power, he also started to take it seriously. However, he was also clear in his heart that such a powerful magic weapon wasn't something an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator could easily control. Therefore, he urged his magic power to quickly fly towards Xiaohua, wanting to seize the opportunity before the cloud-suppressing seal fell. Who would have thought that Xiaohua only slightly urged the cloud-suppressing seal to fly towards him? When the cloud-suppressing seal was slightly raised, a valiant imprisoning force pressed down on the cloud-suppressing seal, directly suppressing the magic power in his body. He actually couldn't break free? Roar! The wolf-headed beast cultivator was shocked. Without thinking, it raised its head and roared. Then its body suddenly expanded. The clothes that were previously draped over its body were torn to shreds. A monster with the upper body of a huge black wolf and the lower body of a human appeared in the air. This monster was at least 20 feet tall. Then in the abnormally thick wolf claws, the wolf-tooth club swayed like a toy, stirring up the spiritual energy with its hoog sound and smashed towards the cloud. Buzz! Just like Xiaohua's previous waving of the wishful steel staff smashed the imprisoning force of the Seven Stars Great Array, this wolf-headed beast cultivator's demonic weapon also shook the imprisoning force above the cloud. The cloud, condensed by magic power, was also somewhat collapsing along with the demonic weapon's agitation. Hiss! Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. This was a technique that used force to break restrictions. Of course, he had long known about it, but he didn't use it too much. He was often using it for sneak attacks. It was only recently that he obtained the wishful steel staff that this technique had a chance to be used openly. He didn't expect that this extremely ugly beast cultivator had actually used it to such a degree of perfection. At this moment, Xiaohua came to a sudden understanding. It was probably precisely because of this that these Dao sect cultivators on the ground were so easily annihilated. If there was no Li Zongbao on the side, Xiaohua would have already taken out the wishful steel staff and fought with these damn things. However, since he wanted to cooperate with Li Zongbao now, it was better to use the cloud-suppressing seal. Fall! Xiaohua didn't dare to neglect. He once again formed a seal and another imprisoning cloud fell. Wu! The several beast cultivators next to the wolf-headed beast cultivator obviously also noticed the abnormality. They also urged their secret method, and each beast cultivator's beast form appeared. The demonic weapon in their hands danced very tacitly and smashed towards the cloud. Buzz! 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 Under the attack of these four powerful beast cultivators' demonic artifacts, the imprisoning cloud, which had always been invincible, only lasted for a few breaths. Then it let out a roar similar to the cloud-suppressing seal and disappeared into the air. Ha ha! The wolf-headed beast cultivator laughed. Dao Sect's child. This is the toy you rely on in front of this grandpa. It's just a piece of junk. Why don't you obediently give me your life? After saying that, he actually gave up the cloud-suppressing seal and wanted to rush towards Xiaohua, wanting to smash Xiaohua's abnormally young head into pieces. However, Xiaohua didn't pay attention to them. He pointed a finger and the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly trembled. Its ancient bronze brilliance flourished greatly, and several patches of clouds once again floated down. Streaks of light once again enveloped the four beast cultivators from above. Roar! The wolf-headed beast cultivator roared towards the sky. Grandpa will tear your magic weapon to pieces. Let you completely give up. Immediately, his figure was like a gust of wind, crossing the air, and a dark figure rushed towards the falling clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal. At the same time, the leopard head and other beast cultivators emitted a black brilliance, and even some black gas came out. They waved their demonic weapons, trying to break free from the imprisonment above the clouds, and wanted to rush to Xiaohua, who was several feet away. Humph! Xiaohua coldly snorted and his hand shook again. The cloud-suppressing seal rumbled again, and several pieces of clouds fell again to attack the wolf-headed beast cultivator. Seeing Xiaohua unexpectedly drop clouds one after another, and his magic power not showing the slightest sign of exhaustion, the wolf-headed beast cultivator had a somewhat bad feeling in his heart. He saw that the wolf-headed beast cultivator's figure had yet to touch the clouds, but the several clouds piled up together with a suffocating force prevented him from flying a step higher. The bronze brilliance above the clouds reflected the bloodthirsty eyes of the beast cultivator, and once again aroused the beast cultivator's wild nature. Bang bang bang! With the sound of hammering in succession, the pitch-black fists of several beast cultivators hit his body. That black brilliance flashed with a scarlet brilliance, and the beast cultivator's head swelled up again. Swish! In midair, the abnormally thick forearms of several beast cultivators madly streaked across, giving birth to rows of phantoms, and together with the demonic tool, they simultaneously slapped the clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal. Rumble rumble! Like a hammer hitting the surface of a drum, the clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal were actually torn apart by them again, and that valiant force also disappeared. Several pieces of clouds were destroyed by the beast cultivators, and the brilliance of Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal was also somewhat dim, as if his magic power was running out. Oh! Xiaohua felt somewhat surprised, but Xiaohua also didn't seem to be surprised. The magic power in his body surged and his hands formed seals again. The cloud-suppressing seal shook again, and 3 more pieces of clouds fell down one after another. Watch this. Seeing Xiaohua skillfully controlling the cloud-suppressing seal, and in the blink of an eye he exchanged several blows with the 4 beast cultivators, Li Zongbao also didn't dare to be negligent. With a loud shout he took out the immortal piercing whip. Li Zongbao dragged the magic treasure upside down, and the magic power in his body surged. His right hand suddenly swung, and the immortal piercing whip swung out a row of light golden whip shadows, and with the sound of wind and thunder, it struck towards the wolf-headed beast cultivator and the others. That immortal piercing whip was indeed powerful. Not only did it absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within several tens of feet, but when the whip shadows stirred, small hurricanes already appeared. Pa 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 pa, seeing the might of the immortal piercing whip, several beast cultivators knew that the situation wasn't good, and each of them brandished their demonic tools, wanting to smash the whip shadows together. Unfortunately, before their magic power surged, the clouds of the cloud-suppressing seal fell down again, and they were confined, unable to mobilize their magic power. The immortal piercing whips might smashed onto the bodies of several beast cultivators. With a loud bang, the wolf-headed beast cultivator hit the main body of the immortal piercing whip. Originally, his body was incomparably hard, almost comparable to magic tools and magic treasures, but in an instant his flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Even when the magic power of the immortal piercing whip reached, the beast cultivator's body exploded. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Bang bang bang, the other whip shadows also fell down in succession, and the bodies of the other 3 beast cultivators also collapsed. They were all badly mutilated and they screamed miserably as they fell from the sky. Just when Li Zongbao killed the wolf-headed beast cultivator, Xiaohua's divine sense swept over, and his magic power surged again. The cloud-suppressing seal flew towards the surrounding beast cultivators, who were originally eager to besiege them, but when they saw the wolf-headed beast cultivator being killed, their eyes flashed with hesitation. However, the dozen or so beast cultivators surrounded the 2 of them, so the cloud-suppressing seal couldn't cover all of them, and could only smash the pig-headed beast cultivator and a few others. Those few are yours. This was the second time Xiaohua saw the might of the immortal piercing whip, and he was also envious in his heart. He pointed his finger at the remaining beast cultivators and shouted. Chapter 2386. Okay, Li Zongbao responded indifferently and waved the immortal piercing whip again. A row of whip shadows danced again and like a stormy sea, they smashed towards the remaining beast cultivators. However, Xiaohua could see that the immortal piercing whip this time was obviously much dimmer than the previous one. Presumably, it was because Li Zongbao's magic power was insufficient. Woo, the immortal piercing whip whimpered as it smashed towards the remaining beast cultivators. When the 4 or 5 beast cultivators saw how powerful the immortal piercing whip was, they knew that just dodging and running away was absolutely not enough. They roared loudly and their bodies were also suffused with black light. They waved the demonic artifacts in their hands and bravely attacked the whip shadows. Poo poo poo. Several sounds rang out as the whip shadows hit the demonic artifacts. The demonic artifacts shook and almost fell from the hands of the beast cultivators. However, even so, several beast cultivators still blocked Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip. Only a leopard head beast cultivator's demonic artifact was smashed by the immortal piercing whip and fell into the air. Seeing this, Li Zongbao's face was slightly embarrassed. He clenched his teeth and the magic power in his body surged again. The immortal piercing whip in his hand suddenly emitted a golden light. In that golden light, talismans circulated, showing extreme power. Attack! Li Zongbao roared and his body moved along with the whip. 5 immortal piercing whips of the same size appeared in the air and attacked the 5 beast cultivators with earth-shattering force. As for Xiaohua, the cloud-suppressing seal swayed and easily trapped the 6 beast cultivators. He urged his magic power one after another, and one after another, imprisoning clouds fell down. Those 6 beast cultivators were obviously extremely powerful, and their respective devil tools were also extraordinary. Unexpectedly, just like the wolf-headed beast cultivator, they were able to defeat Xiaohua's clouds one after another. If it was someone else, under the attack of these 6 beast cultivators, even if the cloud-suppressing seal was extraordinary, their magic power would have already been exhausted, just like Li Zongbao. Unfortunately, they encountered Xiaohua. If Li Zongbao could be called the #1 person under the Gold Core stage, then Xiaohua could look down on all the cultivators under the Nascent Soul stage. How could his magic power be measured by these beast cultivators? Following that, the clouds from the cloud-suppressing seal fell one after another, seemingly endless. The beast cultivators finally collapsed. After the final attack, the beast cultivators couldn't even hold their demonic artifacts steadily and were imprisoned by the clouds. Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip split into 5 and attacked the 5 beast cultivators respectively. The beast cultivators looked at each other and knew that this was the final battle to determine victory. Either you die or I die. Therefore, each of them activated all the strength in their body as well as all the magic power in their body, and waved their demonic weapons, bringing about the sound of wind and drums. Boom! The 5 whips hit the 5 demonic artifacts at almost the same time. The demonic artifacts were all knocked away by the immortal piercing whip's unstoppable force. Moreover, the immortal piercing whip's shadow also imprinted itself onto the 5 beast cultivators as they flew. Ah! The 5 beast cultivators screamed at the same time. Their steel-like bodies were torn open and they fell from the sky. At the same time, Li Zongbao couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale gold. He actually activated his magic power and injured his meridians. Xiaohua glanced at Li Zongbao. It wasn't out of his expectations. Li Zongbao was only in the late stage of foundation establishment. Facing more than 10 beast cultivators whose strength was comparable to late-stage foundation establishment, being able to perish together with them could be considered rare and commendable. Go! Xiaohua pointed the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal flew over with a rumble, smashing the beast cultivators that fell from Li Zongbao's attack to death. Only then did it fly back and smash the 6 beast cultivators that were imprisoned by him. Just as they were about to be smashed to death or injured like the cow-headed beast cultivator and the others, a sudden change occurred. The boar-headed beast cultivator that was easily imprisoned earlier suddenly had a burst of multicolored light appear around his body. He immediately broke free from the cloud-suppressing seal's imprisonment and flew away like a wisp of smoke. His flying speed was actually extremely fast. Xiaohua was stunned and slightly raised his eyebrows. He thoughtfully looked at the boar-headed beast cultivator's back and didn't chase after him in a hurry. Don't let him escape. Li Zongbao's figure stood in midair. Seeing that Xiaohua's magic power didn't seem to be exhausted, he lightly said. Yes, Xiaohua didn't beat around the bush. He raised his hand and the cloud-suppressing seal became more than 10 feet in size. It smashed down and smashed the 5 beast cultivators into meat paste. Immediately after, Xiaohua didn't put away the cloud-suppressing seal and shouted, Brother Li, wait a moment. The magic power in his body surged as he used the hibernating thunder escape and chased after the boar-headed beast cultivator. Li Zongbao's face was still calm, but a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He patted his storage bag and swallowed a pill. Then he put away the immortal piercing whip and slowly descended from the sky. After Li Zongbao cleaned up the corpses of the fallen cultivators, Xiaohua dragged the boar-headed beast cultivator's corpse over. Li Zongbao raised his head and lightly said, You're quite fast. Those who kill my Dao Sex cultivators will be killed no matter how far they are. Xiaohua's gaze swept over and coldly replied, Those who kill my Dao Sex cultivators will be killed no matter how far they are? Li Zongbao sneered, That invisible sword Guyu took the lives of many of my Dao Sex disciples. I saw someone cut off her wrist and took her flying sword. However, when I saw that female swordsman's appearance, not only did I immediately return the flying sword and wrist, I even gave her a healing pill. Isn't that a bit ridiculous? Xiaohua's face was slightly red as he embarrassedly said, Senior brotherly, that was purely an instinctive reaction. I really didn't think too much at that time. And I'll just treat it as if I saw someone sleepwalking. Li Zongbao glanced at the mess on the ground, but you have to remember that being kind to your enemies is being cruel to yourself. Look at this miserable state. This is a lesson. In the future, when you can't bear to kill, look at these cultivators who died with their eyes open. Yes, I understand. Xiao Hua's heart trembled as he raised the beast cultivator's corpse in his hand and said, "Didn't I go to kill them all? And this is your Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple." Li Zongbao said as he handed over the storage pouch in his hand to Xiao Hua. "You should kill them all." "What? They're actually Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples." Xiao Hua looked at the remains of the corpse's Taoist robe. It wasn't the robe worn in the battle. And these cultivators didn't participate in this battle. Li Zongbao saw that Xiao Hua didn't take the storage pouch and threw it over. "There are some jade slips inside. Take a look yourself." "Yes, senior brother Li," Xiao Hua said as he threw the pig-head beast cultivator's corpse down. He spread out his other hand and a ball of colorful silk appeared. "I found this on this beast cultivator's body. I reckon that guy used this to escape the cloud-suppressing seal's imprisonment. And take it yourself." Li Zongbao wasn't interested in this thing. He waved his hand and sat down cross-legged, adjusting his breathing. It seemed that using the immortal piercing whip to kill so many beast cultivators at once was a bit inappropriate. Xiao Hua didn't hold back. He took the colorful silk and looked at the storage pouch. He took out a few tokens and looked at them. He also took out a jade slip and looked at it. He frowned and said, "Brother Li, this is my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple." Chapter 2387. And this is your Imperial Thunder Sect's business. You don't need to tell me. Li Zongbao said without opening his eyes. "I've consumed a lot of magic power and need to adjust my breathing. You can finish the rest." "Yes." Xiao Hua saw that Li Zongbao's complexion was still pale gold, and knew that he hadn't recovered yet. Thus he agreed and took out the suppressing cloud seal. He smashed a large hole in the ground nearby, and threw the corpses of dozens of beast cultivators into it. Then he buried them. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to take the beast cultivators' storage pouches and demonic tools. As for the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples' corpses, although Li Zongbao had already cleaned them up, they were still too horrible to look at. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and closed his eyes. He put the male and female disciples' corpses into 2 storage pouches. As for their belongings, Xiao Hua cleaned them up and put them into another storage pouch. When everything was done, Xiao Hua glanced at Li Zongbao, who was meditating. He took out the jade slips and other items from the Lightning Converting Palace's Foundation Establishment disciples and looked through them. Then he took out 2 of them. One of the 2 jade slips had a restriction, and it was a restriction unique to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Although Xiao Hua hadn't touched it before, the faint flash of lightning was enough to show that if he wasn't sure he could break it, it was better not to touch it. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and put away the jade slip. He looked at the other one again. After a long time, Xiao Hua's brows unconsciously furrowed. He raised his eyes and looked in a direction in the distance. He seemed to have thought of something. After a long while, Xiao Hua put away the jade slip. He patted his hand and took out a Reliance Lotus pill from the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples' storage pouch. He put it in his mouth and closed his eyes to ponder. These Imperial Thunder Sect disciples came from the Imperial Thunder Sect. According to the jade slip, a cultivator named Dui Miaoqing sent a distress message to the Imperial Thunder Sect's Palace Master Dui Jia. However, this message didn't mention the location or the reason. I'm afraid this message is very important and needs to be spoken by a dead Imperial Thunder Sect disciple. Or maybe everything is in this restricted jade slip. It's fine if I'm not a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. If I can break the restriction, then so be it. If I can't, then I don't have to worry about the jade slip being destroyed. But since we have to send the news of these disciples' deaths back, we have to take the items back, and this jade slip cannot be broken. I wonder if Martial Uncle Dui Miaoqing is still alive? Should I return to Sentry City now and pass this message to Martial Uncle Qian Mo in the discussion hall? Well, I'm afraid I don't have to go back directly. Since she asked the Foundation Establishment stage disciples to go back and ask for help, she shouldn't be in danger right now. Maybe she's trapped in some kind of magic formation and can't get out for the time being. She's waiting for the Imperial Thunder School disciples to come and help. Unfortunately, her disciples were all killed by beast cultivators. If she hadn't run into me, who would have known that she was trapped here? Xiaohua thought for a moment and made up his mind. Let's wait for Li Zongbao to adjust his breathing before we ask for his opinion. Sigh, this young master's cultivation is a little too fast. Immediately, Xiaohua began to worry about his own affairs. When I was in the Imperial Thunder Sect, I just reached the late stage of Foundation Establishment stage. According to my cultivation speed, I'm afraid it will take decades or even hundreds of years to reach the peak of the late stage of Foundation Establishment stage. Therefore, I didn't even think of preparing to condense the elixir. Now, after being plotted against by Tu Hong, I rushed to the peak of the late stage of Foundation Establishment stage within 5 years. It seems that I can condense the elixir at any time, but I haven't found the Qianli elixir and the Lingli elixir. And these two elixirs are the key to condensing the elixir. One is to solidify the genuine essence and produce the golden elixir from nothing in the Dantian. The other is to increase the chance of producing the golden elixir. Others have started to prepare when they were in the late stage of Foundation Establishment stage, but I was directly sent to the war. How can I have a chance? Damn it, these two elixir recipes are also extremely important. I've changed a lot of elixir recipes, but there's none in my storage. Even if I want to refine it myself, I can't do it. Hee. Thinking of this, Xiaohua squinted at Li Zongbao in the distance. Li Zongbao's cultivation is in the late stage of Foundation Establishment stage. This guy is the treasure of the Utopia faction. His storage bag. I don't know if there's any elixir. However, this thought of Xiaohua's was just a flash. His cultivation was only close to the middle stage of Foundation Establishment stage. How could he directly ask Li Zongbao about condensing the elixir? Although Xiaohua was still very assured about Li Zongbao, he sympathized with him and Kai Zhuoxiao. Well, to be more vulgar, he and Li Zongbao were somewhat related by marriage. However, after all, Kai Zhuoxiao was no longer in this world, and he and Hong Xiaoferi didn't really have dual cultivation. He didn't dare to reveal the truth in front of Li Zongbao. Forget it, if it's really condensing the elixir and Li Zongbao sees it, there's no need to hide anything from him. That's God's will. Xiaohua thought again. But if it's not in his sight, it's better not to let him know. I only hope that after killing Qingjian I can quickly return to Sky Patrol City, and I can go to EG to find Qianli elixir and Lingli elixir. Li Zongbao really consumed a lot of spiritual power. After adjusting his breath for half a day, he got up from the ground, glanced at Xiaohua who was also sitting in the distance and asked faintly, "Junior brother Xiao, have you settled everything?" "Yes, senior brother Li." Xiaohua heard, opened his eyes, flew over and nodded. "Senior brother and senior sister's corpses. I've collected them separately. When I meet the female disciples, I'll ask them to arrange them carefully. I've also collected the token and other things in another storage bag. You don't have to say it in such detail." Li Zongbao waved his hand. "It's still the same old saying, this is your Imperial Thunder Sect's matter, I won't care. Moreover, if there's anything in your sect you can tell me, I won't restrict you, you can go wherever you want." Xiaohua still wanted to discuss with Li Zongbao, but when he heard Li Zongbao's words he stopped and nodded. "Well, I know. However, you don't have to leave now. Wait and see if there are other Imperial Thunder Sect disciples in front. If there are, ask them to send the message back to Sky Patrol City. I don't have to go there personally." "That's good." Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, "Let's go. Today I was a little careless. If it weren't for you I could only run away. If you really want to leave I still have to think carefully. Without your cooperation it's really not easy to kill Qingjian." Haha, Xiaohua smiled apologetically. "Brother Li, you're too modest. I just took advantage of a magic weapon, I don't have much spiritual power. In my opinion, senior brother's immortal piercing whip is a real magic weapon. It consumes a lot of spiritual power, and its power is definitely more than that." Li Zongbao's figure flew up. Seeing that Xiaohua was also slowly following behind him, a rare smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "And Xiaohua, you're very good. No wonder back then. Zhuoxia said you're outstanding. Your spiritual power is very strong. Although you're only in the middle stage of Foundation Establishment, your control of the cloud suppressing seal is far from what I can do. In fact, I even feel that your magical power is not inferior to that of a golden core cultivator. Of course not. Xiaohua said hurriedly. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Li Zongbao raised his hand again and said, "Don't be anxious. It's good that you're humble and I'm also relieved. After all, there's always someone better than you. Staying true to one's heart is the foundation of us cultivators. But sometimes, if you're too humble, it makes people feel that you're fake. Sometimes when you show your strength, the benefits you get are also far beyond hiding it. Look, your flowing cloud flying ship is not bad, right? You don't dare to take it out casually. I'm not someone else. Let's not talk so much. This is your own matter. Even if I see it, I won't say anything more." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. His spiritual power was getting deeper day by day, and it was very easy to be exposed with his every move. However, not to mention the other secrets he had, just the pure cultivation of a Taoist sect meant that he might have to face an unknown enemy above the spirit-severing stage. How could he not be careful? Xiaohua took out the flowing cloud flying ship again and invited Li Zongbao to get on. He smiled apologetically and said, "Thank you for your teachings, senior brother. I understand. Senior brother, please point out the direction to go." Li Zongbao regained his indifferent expression. After pointing out the direction to fly, he said, "Your eyesight is not bad. This divine whip of mine is a famous magic weapon of my utmost happiness sect. It used to be used by a nascent soul grandmaster. Because of my reputation, the sect bestowed it to me when I was only in the foundation establishment stage. Although I've refined it a few times, I still can't completely control it. Moreover, I think that with my current cultivation I can only use less than 10% of this magic weapon's power." Less than 10%. Xiaohua's eyes widened and he was very shocked. Actually, saying that it's 10% is just me boasting. Li Zongbao smiled bitterly. "I personally saw that nascent soul grandmaster's actions. With just a whip shadow, the heavens fell and the earth split. A mountain peak was split apart by this divine whip." Hiss, that's right. Xiaohua suddenly saw the scene in front of Chicken Crow Mountain. The scene of the old man waving his flying sword and slicing off the mountain peak appeared in front of his eyes. Damn it, I'm really lucky. I've encountered 2 nascent soul cultivators and luckily escaped. Xiaohua unconsciously thought of that nascent soul cultivator in Ink Shadow Black Forest and Taoist Jingxi who chased after him for several years. Fortunately, I didn't give them a chance. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. It seems that my suppressing cloud seal and soaring dragon scissors are not enough to resist nascent soul cultivators. Thinking of this, Xiaohua thought of the overturning sea seal that He Feng Yuan had mentioned. If he could obtain the refinement method of the overturning sea seal, or even a complete overturning sea seal, it might be much stronger than the suppressing cloud seal. Thus, sometimes revealing one's strength and getting the attention of the sect may not be a bad thing. Li Zongbao didn't know how Xiaohua was thinking about killing nascent soul cultivators. He only casually said, "Your Imperial Thunder sect might not be able to compare to my Tai Ching sect, but if you can take out 1 or 2 magic weapons that are comparable to the divine whip, it will be extremely easy. It will be much better than your suppressing cloud seal." Chapter 2388. Maybe. Xiaohua knew that Li Zongbao meant well, but his situation was very different from Li Zongbao's. If this was applied to Xiang Zhili, it would be appropriate. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't take it seriously, Li Zongbao didn't say anything more. He still released his divine sense to observe the direction they were going. After the flowing cloud flying ship flew for nearly 10 days, the surroundings changed again. Although Sentry City was located in the north, it was unusually cold and all kinds of colorful snow scenery were pleasing to the eye, but it was still not comparable to the world of glaciers here. Outside the flying boat, the sky had cleared up, not the usual gloomy sky of Sentry City. White clouds floated in the blue sky, and the sky was so blue that it was as if it had been washed clean. It was spotless. Just by looking at it, one would be immersed in it and one's whole mind would be dyed blue. Under the clear blue sky, it was a world of ice. Everything was made of ice and ordinary snow was a rare sight. In fact, other than the occasional grayish-green moss that could be seen under the crystalline ice, there was nothing else that had anything to do with vegetation. Although there was a faint layer of brilliance outside the flying boat, it was used to defend and resist the wind. At this time, it was also covered with a layer of sparkling ice as thick as a thumb. It was just that the ice layer was transparent and bright and it didn't block the view. After clearing the first layer, Xiaohua ignored it. Cultivators had always been unafraid of cold and heat, but here even the breath they exhaled was a little bit of ice, which made Xiaohua feel a little cold. Looking at Li Zongbao, although he was sitting casually on the flying boat, there was a faint layer of sparkling brilliance around his body, which should also be resisting the extreme cold. Although Xiaohua and Li Zongbao had been traveling together for more than 10 days, Xiaohua was not a talkative person. He didn't care about other people's privacy, especially the privacy of male cultivators. Li Zongbao was practicing parting love's treasure mirror, and his expression became more and more indifferent. Although he treated Xiaohua a little differently, he still didn't talk much. In fact, the two of them were almost the same as when they met decades ago, and they didn't have any special understanding of each other. However, at this time, Li Zongbao glanced at Xiaohua, stood up, stretched his body and pointed his finger in the air. A bright light flashed, and the layer of ice covering the flying boat suddenly disappeared. We've already entered the Huan country and the climate is extremely cold. The swordsmen of the Huan country survive in this harsh climate. No matter if it's their willpower or physique, they're much stronger than us cultivators. Swordsmen also specialize in attacking, emphasizing on killing with one strike. That's why there's the saying that swordsmen have a higher attack power than us cultivators. Li Zongbao said indifferently as he looked at the ice dots that were rapidly condensing on the flowing cloud-flying ship. Indeed. Seeing that Li Zongbao rarely spoke, Xiaohua echoed, the toughness of the physical body is very important for cultivators. I won't hide it from you, senior brother. I've obtained a secret technique to temper my body. Although I can't compare to body cultivators now, I'm still much stronger than ordinary cultivators, so my magic power. Li Zongbao didn't seem interested in Xiaohua's explanation. He first looked outside the boat with his hands behind his back, then turned to look at Xiaohua and said, "That's not what I'm talking about. I'm thinking that since the Huan country, Shi country, Meng country and Lian country are all part of the Dawn Rain continent, we cultivators can also come here to cultivate. Especially those with water-type or ice-type constitutions. In this environment, their cultivation will definitely advance by leaps and bounds." Oh, that's true. Xiaohua didn't expect Li Zongbao's thoughts to jump so far. He was slightly stunned and nodded. Actually, sometimes I'm also thinking that whether it's sword cultivators or Taoists, they're just different cultivation methods. They're all cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent. As cultivators, why are they so anxious to kill each other? Li Zongbao's words shocked Xiaohua even more. When Xiaohua heard this, he was deeply moved and said with a smile, "That's right. I met the twin female swordsmen of the Huan country at the Taiching sect's Feather Immortal Assembly. Oh, wasn't senior brother Li also there at that time? Those two female swordsmen were very amiable. They're far from comparable to the swordsmen in the war. If there's no war, they're all modest gentlemen." Li Zongbao nodded. "If there's a war, they're all murderous demons. We look at sword cultivators like that, and sword cultivators look at us cultivators like that too." Instantly Xiaohua thought of Ling Yunwu and that Yuan. The two exceptionally loving sword cultivator husband and wife. If it wasn't for the war, how could they have fallen at Gold Spring Mountain? Ling Yunwu admittedly transformed into a sword, but that Yuan ended up being a martyr. However, the situation at that time was dangerous. There was no need for Guyu. How could he be merciful? Perhaps the evil is in this war and not in the cultivators and swordsmen? Xiaohua sighed inwardly. If there's a chance, I still want to see if I can distinguish between the two of them among those 10 flying swords. Even if they transformed into swords, I still want them to stay together. Seeing Xiaohua pondering, Li Zongbao thought that he didn't agree with his point of view and said, "Actually, don't look at the atrocities of beast cultivators. It's really despicable. But the actions of some cultivators aren't inferior by much." Oh. There's such a thing? Xiaohua was stunned. He originally thought that only when beast cultivators and demon beasts cultivated at the same time, there would be a change in their mentality and so on. Only then would they commit such atrocities. He didn't expect that cultivators could also do such a thing. Humans and beasts in some aspects are so similar. Li Zongbao didn't explain and sighed. That's right. Xiaohua thought of those 10 swordsmen again. Didn't they also commit violence against the female cultivators of the Dao sect? If cultivators did this, it would also be normal. Unfortunately, we're only Foundation establishment cultivators. Although our hearts are big, our strength is limited. It's already not bad that we're able to keep ourselves safe in this war. Li Zongbao looked at the spotlessly white ground and mountains and said, the twin female swordsmen you mentioned just now are the key to this war. If we can find them or find out where they died. If we can prove that they have nothing to do with the Dao sect, the sword cultivators won't have an excuse to fight, and this war will end. Xiaohua also smiled bitterly. He also knew about this, but the problem was that Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuha had disappeared for more than 1 or 2 years. They disappeared when Xiaohua was at the beginning of the 12th level of qi refinement. Now that Xiaohua was at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment, they still hadn't appeared. Moreover, if they could be found, the 3 kingdoms of cultivation would have found them long ago. Why wait until now? The Gale snowfield is in front. Li Zongbao took out a jade slip, looked at it for a moment and pointed, with the speed of the flowing cloud flying boat, we'll be there in 2 days. Where did Senior Brotherly get the news? This place is so far away from the Sky Patrol City, who would know that Qingjian would come here? Xiaohua asked with some doubts. He, Li Zongbao smiled mysteriously, this news was revealed by Qingjian himself. I don't understand. Xiaohua was even more puzzled. Chapter 2389. That Qingjian thinks too highly of himself. In these past few years he often released some specious news to lure our Dao sect cultivators to go there and then ambush them. And those disciples who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth are also strange. They clearly know that it's inappropriate but they still fall into the trap. It's as if they think that only they can see through the trap and only they can kill Qingjian. Li Zongbao explained, and this news was obtained from one of the elders on duty at the assembly hall. So that's how it is. I'm afraid it's because of the reward from the Yanxi Mansion's assembly hall? Xiaohua nodded, but he was secretly criticizing Li Zongbao in his heart. What was the difference between Li Zongbao's actions and those disciples who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth? After flying for another half a day, the mountains and rivers below the flying boat gradually disappeared. Huge ice lakes and continuous glaciers began to appear. Above the ice lakes, the ice was as hard as iron, abnormally sparkling and translucent. It was like a huge mirror that reflected the bright sunlight into the sky. And the glaciers were like jade ribbons that coiled around the ice plains. It was a spectacular sight. When he looked again, he saw that in the distance, there was a faint mist that covered half of the sky. That's where the glacier's geothermal energy is. Seeing Xiaohua look into the distance, Li Zongbao explained, as the saying goes, there's yin and yang and yin. Yin and yang have always been symbiotic. In this extremely cold place in Huan country, there will often be geothermal energy rising from the ground, giving birth to a kind of hot spring. The water of this hot spring is warm, and even in extremely cold places it won't freeze. It's completely different from the cold of the glaciers here. It's a strange scene in the world. After you and I kill Qingjian, we'll go and take a look. Ah, very good. Xiaohua smiled and nodded. But in an instant, his mind suddenly moved as if there was some reaction from the hand of karma. There's yang and yin and yang. These words sound very familiar. It seems to be related to something. But when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't figure it out. He was completely baffled and couldn't even touch the boundary. Since it's from the hand of karma, it must be very important. Ever since Xiaohua experienced the feeling of karma a few times, he knew the crux of the matter. He already understood that everything in this world was made up of karma. If he could control karma, then he would be able to avoid karma. If he could avoid karma, then he would be able to escape from the mortal world. This was extremely useful for his own cultivation. Therefore he attached great importance to anything related to karma. Could it be that this Tao of yin and yang is the karma that I sensed in the great formation of Mount Quanjin? If that's the case, then we still have to make a trip to the geothermal glacier. Seeing that Xiaohua was deep in thought again, Li Zongbao was bewildered. After thinking for a moment, he didn't know what he had said to Xiaohua. Thus he didn't say anything and closed his eyes to regulate his breathing. In 2 days he would have to face Qin Jian. Qin Jian was a sword cultivator with a fierce reputation. Li Zongbao didn't have full confidence in defeating him. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and opened his eyes thoughtfully. Seeing that Li Zongbao had closed his eyes again, he didn't say anything. Instead he urged the flowing cloud-flying ship to continue moving forward. At the same time he took out the Jade Talisman Refinement Manual from the Huang family of Tianmen Mountain and reviewed it again. Xiao Hua had already tried to comprehend this elementary and somewhat incomplete Jade Talisman back when he was at Tianmen Mountain. Unfortunately, he didn't have any jade essences for him to practice on. Now that he had a lot of jade essences in his space, how could he not take out the matter of refining jade talismans? 2 days passed quickly. Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense but couldn't see a single person. He couldn't help but ask, "Senior Brother Li, is this the Gale snowfield? Where are those disciples lying in ambush?" "I don't know either," Li Zongbao said softly. "Just fly slowly, you'll see them eventually." "Ah? You don't know?" Xiao Hua was astonished. "Of course I don't know," Li Zongbao said matter-of-factly. "However, the Gale snowfield is only 10,000 li in size. If those disciples were to fight with Qin Jian, I'll definitely see them. You just have to look for them slowly, okay?" So it's the legendary waiting for rabbits. Xiao Hua understood. He had no choice but to activate the flying boat again and fly aimlessly above the glacier. He also released his divine sense and kept searching. On the Gale snowfield above a square ice lake, the sun was shining brightly. The pale white sunlight scattered weakly on the surface of the lake. The mirror-like ice layer reflected the light to a protrusion on a mountain peak not far away. That protrusion was also a layer of ice. It was astonishingly thick. The light passed through the ice layer and gathered on the ground at the foot of the mountain. After the light gathered, it was so hot that it was far hotter than the heat from the sky. In just a moment, water vapor rose from the ice and snow at the foot of the mountain. As the sun moved in the sky, the water vapor also moved like an earthworm. Phew, just as the earthworm moved to the side of a stone, a light flashed frequently. After a yellow light was annihilated, a tall middle-aged man appeared in the light. The middle-aged man's face was filled with confusion. He patted his hand and took out a talisman from his body. It was the rare invisibility talisman in the Dawn Rain continent. Strange. The middle-aged man looked left and right as if he was looking for something. When his gaze landed on the water vapor, he patted his forehead and laughed. "Damn it, so it's this. I actually encountered such a miraculous thing." Then the middle-aged man raised his head and looked at another place not far away. He shouted, "Senior Brother Qian, Quanjia, what are you doing? Why aren't you hiding yourself quickly? If Qin Jian sees you, won't our ambush fail?" A slightly impatient voice sounded from the direction Quanjia was looking at. Tisk, Quanjia snorted and sat down disapprovingly. He patted his hand and took out a white spiritual fruit from the storage bag at his waist. He took a bite and a milky white juice seeped out of the spiritual fruit and flowed into Quanjia's mouth. "This has been hidden for 10 days and not a single sword cultivator came. I'm afraid this news didn't even reach the sword cultivator's ears. Or maybe Qin Jian didn't even want to accept our challenge. Why do you still have this milky rain fruit?" Senior Brother Qian was surprised. Then with a flash of light, a short cultivator with a dark and thin face appeared. "Hee, I took this from the sword cultivator's storage bag," Quan Jie replied with a smile. He patted his hand and another milky rain fruit was thrown to Senior Brother Qian. "That swordswoman who gestated her sword?" Senior Brother Qian was surprised. He caught the milky rain fruit and took a bite. Then he smiled lewdly. "This taste is similar to that swordswoman's." "Yes, it's that swordswoman's." Quan Jie was also reminiscing. "I didn't expect that a swordswoman who gestated her sword would have so many good things in her storage bag." Tisk tisk, Senior Brother Qian smacked his lips and said, "It's a pity for that swordswoman." Hee, what's there to pity? In this war there are many swordswomen like her. You can find as many as you want. Are you afraid that you can't find her? Shoo, Senior Brother Qian seemed to have thought of something. He stretched out his index finger and gestured for Quan Jie to keep quiet. Then he said softly, It's enough for you and me to know about this. There are many cultivators lying in ambush in the Gale snowfield today. If news of this spreads to the sect, it will be disadvantageous to both of us. I understand. Quan Jie smiled lewdly and said, those are just entertainment for us during the war. Killing Qin Jian is the most important thing. If you and I were to kill Qin Jian and obtain the reward from the discussion hall, we will definitely be rewarded when we return to our sect. Not to mention our future path of cultivation, even our junior sisters will be impressed by us. What is this female swordsman worth? It's just that. Senior Qian lifted his head to look at the sky and said worriedly, just as Junior Quan said, we don't know if Qin Jian has received the challenge. If he doesn't come, wouldn't our formation be useless? Why don't we release my spiritual bird? Quan Jie thought for a while and asked softly. Senior brother Qian shook his head slightly. This is the Huan Kingdom. The bird cultivators of the Huan Kingdom are very powerful. Their spirit beasts are much more powerful than those of the Black Spirit sect. If some of the bird cultivators are in the Gale snowfield, won't they discover the spiritual bird immediately? If that's the case, our location will be exposed. Then, we can't just wait like this. Quan Jie smacked his lips and smiled apologetically. After waiting for so long, why don't we go somewhere else and see if there are any swordsmen who are alone? Alright, wait for a while. I will go and ask Pan Hao. Senior brother Qian thought for a while and nodded. He turned and flew away softly. He is just a disciple of the Xuanyan school. Seeing that senior brother Qian had left, Quan Jie's lips curled up slightly. He seemed to be disdainful. If I had also entered the Xuanyan school, I would have already condensed my core. How can I be like him, who is only in the middle stage of foundation establishment? What is there to be proud of? If not for the fact that I have some use for him, he probably wouldn't even recognize me. As he said that, Quan Jie didn't dare to be careless. He put the milk rain fruit into his mouth and activated the invisibility talisman. He stuck it on his body and disappeared. Senior brother Qian was Qian Feng. Like Quan Jie, he was also a disciple of the spirit husbandry sect. Hopefully, they were both at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment and were close to the middle stage of foundation establishment. The spirit husbandry sect was considered a small sect in the country of Xi, and there weren't many disciples participating in the war. Therefore, the two of them weren't sent to the Sky Patrol City. However, since the two of them participated in the encirclement of Chao Wu's soul in the Flame Forest Swamp decades ago and benefited from it, their cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds from the early stage of foundation establishment to the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. They coveted the middle stage of foundation establishment and knew that if they simply cultivated within the sect, they wouldn't have the chance to easily enter the middle stage of foundation establishment. If they wanted to improve further, they would have to be like the Flame Forest Swamp and obtain some opportunities. Chapter 2390. Coincidentally, the battle between Dao cultivators had begun. Although they were not selected, they came to the vicinity of Sky Patrol City in the name of training. In the beginning, the two of them were really apprehensive. However, when they arrived at the Sentry City on the battlefield, they realized that there were many cultivators like them who wanted to seek opportunities and take advantage of the situation. Not only did the council hall not blame them, it even gave them a lot of convenience. For example, the meeting hall offered a reward for killing Qin Jian. Regardless of whether the cultivators were participating in the battle or not, as long as they killed Qin Jian, the reward would be the same. Of course, the two of them did not plan to kill Qin Jian. They only carefully searched the vicinity of Sky Patrol City or the border of Huan country for lone swordsmen. If they encountered a group of swordsmen, they would immediately escape. If they could not escape, they would send a signal for help to the Dao sect cultivators. In short, they had the intention of taking advantage of others. The two of them were also lucky. After several years of war, the two of them had obtained many benefits. Their cultivation had been improving and they were much stronger than when they were in spirit husbandry sect. Therefore, the two of them became bolder and bolder. Half a year ago, the two of them met Pan Hao, a disciple of Xuanyan cult who was about to leave Sky Patrol City. Pan Hao had some old acquaintances with Qian Feng. The three of them chatted for a while and Pan Hao invited the two of them to the Gale snowfield. He said that someone had organized an ambush to kill Qin Jian and had issued a challenge to Qin Jian. He invited the two of them to participate. When Qian Feng and Quan Jie heard that they were going to ambush the illusory swordsman, they shook their heads and flatly refused. However, Pan Hao explained in detail that the person who organized the ambush was a golden core cultivator and there were more than 300 Dao sect cultivators participating in the ambush. They were tempted. What was more special was when Pan Hao explained that they only needed to use their spiritual birds to find out Qin Jian's whereabouts. They did not need to fight with Qin Jian. As long as they killed Qin Jian, they would be able to obtain credit and a reward. They could no longer suppress their desire and immediately agreed to work with Pan Hao. However, Pan Hao and the other Xuanyan school disciples had come to the Gale Snow Plains to reinforce a small spirit stone mine in Xuanyan school. This ambush was arranged for half a year later and they did not follow Pan Hao and the other Xuanyan school disciples to the Gale Snow Plains. The two of them set off from Sky Patrol City alone and killed many sword-nurturing swordsmen along the way. Only then did they arrive here satisfied. But when he arrived here, Quan Jie discovered something wrong. The Gale Snowfield was simply too cold. His spirit bird could not stay in the air for too long. It could only fly outside for the time it took to brew a cup of tea before it had to turn back. Otherwise it would be frozen to death. And in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, how high and how far could the spirit bird fly? As a result, Pan Hao and the others treated Quan Jie coldly again. They even vaguely mentioned that if Quan Jie and Qian Feng were of no use, even if they killed Qin Jian, they would not be able to obtain the reward they mentioned earlier. Quan Jie was naturally unhappy. Because of this, he almost fell out with Pan Hao. Therefore, when he saw Qian Feng looking for Pan Hao, Quan Jie showed disdain. After a while, Qian Feng turned back and sent a message to Quan Jie, asking him to release the spirit bird. When Quan Jie heard that, he had no choice but to reveal himself again. He took out a fiery red strange bird the size of a palm from the spirit storage bag on his right. The strange bird's head was triangular like an earthworm's beak. A flesh pouch the size of a thumb hung in front of its chest. When it spread its fiery red wings, the feathers opened up, revealing the red bird's skin under the feathers. Go, Quan Jie instructed in a low voice. The spirit bird circled in the air a few times and shot up into the sky like a sharp arrow. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. Kisk Qian Feng, who was beside him, revealed a tinge of envy in his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Junior brother Quan, your spirit bird is getting more and more powerful. Back then the soul was not used in vain. Senior brother Qian, didn't your Lian Bao also devour souls? Why are you envious of me?" Quan Jie was secretly happy, but his face showed that he did not care. How can it be compared? Qian Feng smiled bitterly. I, Lian Bao, have not improved as fast as your little thing these years. Qian Feng still wanted to say more, but Quan Jie's face tightened and he hurriedly looked up at the sky. Oh, there's news? Qian Feng immediately shut up and asked in a low voice. Quan Jie ignored him and only narrowed his eyes to look at the sky. After half a cup of tea's time, the spiritual bird once again fell from the sky. Its fiery red feathers were now covered with ice, and its triangular bird head was also trembling slightly. When it landed in Quan Jie's hand, Quan Jie only felt a wave of coldness. Quan Jie did not dare to delay and hurriedly put the spirit bird into the spirit storage bag. How is it? Qian Feng asked anxiously again. Well, Quan Jie hesitated slightly and sent a message. About 15 kilometers west of here, there are more than 10 sword cultivator disciples. Oh? Sword cultivator disciples? More than 10? Qian Feng frowned. What are they doing? They're in a sorry state. Their sword armor is tattered and they look nervous, as if they were defeated and fled. Quan Jie narrowed his eyes and said. Qian Feng's face instantly lit up with joy. According to his and Quan Jie's experience, these scattered disciples were the easiest to bully. As long as the two of them showed themselves, these disciples would definitely flee at the sight of them. They did not need to put on airs. And they only needed to focus on a few swordsmen and they would most likely succeed. However, Qian Feng's joy disappeared in a flash. There's no trace of Qin Jian? No. Quan Jie replied, and his tone suddenly had some impatience. How could his thoughts not be the same as Qian Feng's? Forget it. Qian Feng also knew Quan Jie's thoughts and sent a message. Don't mess up Pan Hao's plan. We can't afford to offend Xuanyan's school. I know. Quan Jie nodded, but his eyes turned slightly and smiled. Should we tell them about this? Qian Feng hesitated slightly, but when he saw Quan Jie's smile he understood and nodded. Of course, aren't we here to send a message? How can we not tell them? Then Qian Feng flew away again, but not long after he turned back and sent a message. Pan Hao also asked that Golden Core Senior, but the Golden Core Senior ignored him. Quan Jie was a little disappointed. Another 2 hours passed. If it were any other time, Quan Jie definitely wouldn't release the spirit bird so quickly. However, today his heart felt as if it was being scratched by a cat's paw. He couldn't help but slap his hand and release the spirit bird from his spirit storage bag once again. When the spiritual bird suddenly appeared, the feathers on its body suddenly exploded, and its entire body trembled as if it was extremely uncomfortable. Chapter 2391. Go Quan Jie's heart ached, but he still urged the spiritual bird. The spiritual bird reluctantly flapped its wings a few times in midair and soared into the sky. After a while Quan Jie was even more surprised. He hurriedly said to Qian Feng, "Senior brother Qian, quickly go and report to the Golden Core Seniors. 10 miles away, another 200 sword cultivators have appeared. Most of them are in the sword nurturing stage. They look similar to the swordsmen from before. They are all defeated. Furthermore, half of these sword cultivators were female swordsmen. From what I see, that Qin Jian will definitely not come. Or perhaps he has been lured away by another challenge. We will be wasting our time again. Why don't we reap some rewards?" "All right." Hearing this, Qian Feng's face was filled with joy. Naturally, he did not dare to send out his spiritual will. Instead, he hurriedly flew out to look for Pan Hao. According to their agreement, in order to not disturb Qin Jian and expose their ambush, only the Golden Core Cultivator could send out his spiritual will. The others were not allowed to do so. Just as Qian Feng left, the spiritual bird flew back from the sky. The spiritual bird's body was even colder. A thin layer of ice had formed around its body. When it flew above Quan Jie's head, it almost fell straight down. After Quan Jie kept the spiritual bird, he looked anxiously at the spot where Qian Feng disappeared. Right above his head, tens of thousands of feet in the sky, behind a few clear white clouds, there was an eagle's shadow that was faintly discernible. Chirp! A sound came from the edge of the glacier 1,000 feet away from Quan Jie. A message talisman flew to the peak of a mountain nearby. Then a dozen more message talismans flew out from the peak. These message talismans flew to different locations. From the locations where the message talismans landed, a dozen late Foundation establishment cultivators appeared. Similarly, each cultivator sent out another dozen message talismans to different locations. Not long after, almost 400 Foundation establishment cultivators appeared around Quan Jie's ambush. The formation they had set up covered a few miles. The 400 cultivators who had revealed themselves did not stop there. Their figures flew up separately and flew towards the west in an outflanking manner. Quan Jie was naturally overjoyed as well. He flew up and followed behind the crowd. By the time they were several li away from the fleeing group of swordsmen, the 400 Foundation establishment cultivators had already surrounded the 300 swordsmen. Everyone's divine senses were also sweeping towards those pitiful swordsmen without restraint. The 300 sword cultivators were flying between the two mountain peaks on their flying swords. They were originally in an extremely sorry state and were abnormally exhausted. When they sensed the divine senses of the 400 Foundation establishment cultivators, they were greatly alarmed. Some of the sword cultivators with higher cultivation also sent out their divine senses. When they saw that the cultivators had already surrounded them, they became even more alarmed. The 300 sword cultivators scattered like monkeys when the tree topples, and hurriedly rushed out of the mountain peaks. Outside the mountain peaks there was another huge glacier. The oval ice surface was already shining with a faint golden brilliance under the slanting sunlight. Chase! When Quan Jie saw this, he was overjoyed. He shouted as he channeled his magic power and flew towards a female swordsman who was panicking. Qian Feng didn't show any signs of weakness. He chased after another female swordsman whose sword armor was torn apart, revealing her white arms. Above the crowd, A golden core cultivator with white hair and beard revealed a fierce look in his eyes. However, his expression was still cautious. He released his divine senses and scanned the surrounding 10 li radius, fearing that there might be a sword cultivator lying in ambush. However, when the 400 cultivators had completely surrounded the swordsman, all of them laughed sinisterly as they took out their magic weapons and other items. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Only then did the golden core cultivator relax. Kill. The golden core cultivator also did not hesitate. He waved his hand, and the magical artifacts of the 400 cultivators, of all kinds and colors, flew out from all directions like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers, and attacked the panicked swordsman. When the swordsmen saw so many magic weapons flying out, their previous expressions were swept away and replaced with calmness. The flying swords under their feet also flew out to meet the enemy. Quan Jie flew in front of the crowd, following behind the fleeing female swordsman at a distance of several feet. He knew very well that this was the safest distance. If he got any closer, the female swordsman might have some secret technique or the like to fight like a cornered beast. Just as he heard the golden core cultivator's command, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He took out a rope-like magic weapon in his hand. An orange-red brilliance flashed from the rope. At the same time, the rope danced in midair and fell towards the female swordsman's towering breasts. Quan Jie could almost see the female swordsman's panic when she was trapped by the rope, and all the things that happened after that. It was exactly the same as what the golden core cultivator saw. When the magic weapon of the rope fell on the female swordsman's head, the spinning confinement force had yet to fall. The originally panicked female swordsman suddenly smiled, turning her head and grinning at him, as if she was smiling at someone deeply in love. Oh! Quan Jie was stunned. He immediately felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, although the female swordsman was only at the 6th grade of the sword nurturing stage, she suddenly turned around and stopped in midair. The flying sword under her feet whistled and turned into a shooting star, rushing towards the magic weapon that was pouncing towards her. With a piercing sound, the flying sword pierced the brilliance of the magic weapon, making a very frightening sound. However, when he realized that the magic power of the flying sword was much weaker than his own, Quan Jie's heart that had just tightened was put at ease again. This female swordsman was obviously at the 6th grade of the sword nurturing stage, similar to a cultivator at the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. Compared to a cultivator at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, she was still a little bit weaker. Quan Jie pointed his finger at the magic weapon and urged his magic power. The rope spun rapidly and a fierce force and dazzling brilliance appeared again, carrying Quan Jie's uncontrollable desire to rush towards the female swordsman. Hiss! With a sound, Quan Jie's magic weapon had indeed caught the female swordsman's flying general. The meteor that was carrying the sword aura disappeared. A flying general that was the size of a willow leaf and overflowing with sword aura appeared in the rope. However, the remaining force of the rope did not dissipate, and it brought the flying sword down towards the female swordsman. The female swordsman's face was slightly shocked. Her figure quickly shrank and she turned around and rushed towards the glacier 1,000 feet below her. Ha, little girl! Quan Jie laughed loudly and his figure rushed down along with the rope. He did not want to let the little white sheep in his mouth slip away. At the moment when Quan Jie rushed down, he was distracted and glanced at Qian Feng, who was only a few hundred feet away from him. Qian Feng was the same as him. He released the spiritual beast Lien leopard from his spiritual storage bag. It opened its bloody mouth and rushed towards the petite female swordsman with bared fangs and brandished claws. It seemed like it could catch the female swordsman in a moment. Hee! Quan Jie's heart could not help but swell. His spirit was once again invigorated and his figure sped up. However, at this moment, with a loud bang, a thumb-sized plum blossom suddenly bloomed in the incomparably hard layer of ice. The plum blossom seemed to have bloomed in this hard layer of ice, and its development caused the whole layer of ice to explode. As the red plum blossom spun in midair and rushed into the sky, the fist-sized ice chips also flew everywhere. Quan Jie was the closest to the ice at this moment, and he bore the brunt of the red plum blossom and ice chips. However, before Quan Jie could figure out what was happening, the red plum blossom was already close to him. Quan Jie very naturally activated his spiritual power, and the light protecting his body shone brightly. As the light flashed, the fist-sized ice chips were all bounced off and even turned into ice water. However, the thumb-sized red plum blossom seemed to contain a huge amount of power, and as it sat cross-legged, it drilled into the light. Puff puff puff. Dozens of muffled sounds rang out, and blood splattered everywhere the red plum blossom passed. Quan Jie's light protecting his body was shattered by the red plum blossom, and the dozens of red plum blossom instantly penetrated his body. Quan Jie's eyes flashed with a trace of disbelief. With a scream, his vision turned black and he fell from mid-air. And until his death he did not even see who killed him. The sudden appearance of the red plum blossom and the instant death of Quan Jie immediately aroused Qian Feng's vigilance. Then with a boom, Qian Feng's body exploded from the inside, and like Lian Bao he shattered into pieces and scattered in midair. Ha ha! After the red plum blossom under the murderous fist, there was a burst of laughter. Two muscular middle-aged illusory swordsmen wearing sword attire rushed out of the ice layer of the glacier, and flew straight into the sky. Chapter 2392. As the two of them flew past, red plum blossoms took the lives of dozens of foundation-building cultivators. Their fists flashed and destroyed the bodies of dozens of foundation-building cultivators. Not only that, with a series of bang bang bang, ice blocks several feet in size were overturned one by one. Nearly 300 swordsmen of the 3rd or 4th level flew out from the ice. Flying swords of various colors appeared at the same time, blocking the attacks of the 400 foundation-building cultivators. We've been ambushed. The 400 cultivators who had set up the ambush saw the swordsmen of the drawing swords appear and their hearts tightened. How could they not know what had happened? They wanted to kill Qin Jian, but they did not expect that Qin Jian would see through their plan and lead them into the ambush they had set up. What these 400 cultivators did not understand was when the swordsmen of the drawing swords had set up the ambush, and why they could not detect the swordsmen under the ice with their divine senses. Of course, these questions were no longer a problem at this time. Facing 700 to 800 swordsmen, the 400 cultivators only had one thing to do: either kill these swordsmen or escape. Kill. All the swordsmen's faces were filled with excitement, as if their prey had taken the bait, just like the previous cultivator. Flying swords appeared in their hands and fiercely pierced toward the cultivators. That cultivator was like the previous swordsman of the drawing swords. While his face was filled with panic, he also summoned the magic weapons in his hands, trying to fight for a chance to survive. Pan Hao was a male cultivator with a huge body. His muscles were bulging and he was similar to an ordinary body cultivator. When the two illusory swordsmen appeared, he was using his magic weapon, the aquatic droplet, to smash the head of a drawing swordsman. Seeing that the illusory swordsman was right under him and that his fists were surging up like waves, killing many cultivators, he did not dare to be careless. He activated the magic power in his body, and the aquatic droplet fell on top of his head, scattering a thin layer of brilliance to protect him. Pan Hao had only just managed to protect himself when the murderous fist arrived. The fist stirred up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and brought about a trembling sound. The fist's afterimage shattered Pan Hao's protective brilliance wherever it went. Hiss! Pan Hao sucked in a breath of cold air and activated all the magic power in his body. The aquatic droplet also turned into the size of a fist and met the swordsman's fist. With a loud bang, Pan Hao's mind shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression was dispirited as he was knocked back several hundred feet. The brilliance of his aquatic water bead was annihilated. With a few crisp sounds, a few cracks appeared on the surface of the aquatic water bead and quickly spread across the entire magic treasure. When the aquatic water bead appeared several hundred feet away, it had already split into several pieces. When the illusory swordsman saw that Pan Hao was still alive, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. However, he didn't bother to attack Pan Hao again. Phew! Pan Hao let out a long sigh. Like Xiao Mao and Feng Linbua, he was a disciple of the Xunyan school who survived the elimination of the seedlings. Their meridians were wider and tougher than normal cultivators. Although they were only in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, their mana was comparable to the peak of the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. Yet they were able to survive the attack of the illusory swordsman. However, Pan Hao only relaxed for a moment before hundreds of swordsmen flew out from under the ice. Run. This was Pan Hao's only thought at this moment. He only had one golden core cultivator on his side, and in terms of numbers, the cultivators were inferior to the swordsmen. This was where the swordsmen were lying in ambush and there might be some powerful sword formations. However, when Pan Hao turned to look at the golden core cultivator, he was puzzled. This early-stage golden core cultivator was the martial uncle of the Xuanyan school, Pang Chongtian. It was because of his support that Pan Hao and Feng Linbo dared to come out of the spirit stone vein they were guarding and set up an ambush in the Gale snowfield. Pang Chongtian's face was as calm as water as he faced the two aquatic swordsmen. However, there was a hint of a sneer on his face. What? Is Qin Jian afraid? We have already issued a challenge. Why is he still not coming to the Gale snowfield? Why did he send the two of you to your deaths? Pang Chongtian's tone was filled with disappointment. What is Qin Jian? Isn't he just an illusory swordsman from the Void Heaven Sword School? How can he be so powerful in your eyes? The swordsman with the red plum flying sword waved his hand and a withered branch full of red plum blossoms appeared in his hand. Facing the snow-white sword, he looked extremely refined. However, the arrogance in his tone was as if he did not care about Qin Jian at all. Greedy cultivators like you have issued challenges to the sword domain every day. However, Qin Jian is just an aquatic swordsman and cannot be in two places. How can he satisfy all of you? The other bald swordsman stood in midair like a King Kong. He did not hold any flying sword in his empty hands. However, there was a faint layer of sword radiance on his exposed left arm, as if his arm was his flying sword. I was wondering. Pang Chongtian also smiled and did not seem to be afraid. He pointed with his hand and said, "Since you have come to your deaths, I have no choice but to accept it. Even if it is not Qin Jian, I will still be rewarded if I take your heads back, right? You?" The red plum swordsman sneered. "You are just an early-stage golden core cultivator and you will have a problem dealing with me. You want to kill both of us? Don't you think you are a joke? Who said that I am the only one?" Pang Chongtian sneered. The schemes of the Dao sect cultivators will never be understood by swordsmen from the savage land. Pang Chongtian looked behind the red plum swordsman and smiled. "Daoist Jiang and Daoist Luan can show yourselves now." "Oh." The red plum swordsman was shocked and quickly looked back. However, at this moment the other swordsman shouted angrily, "This bastard is cheating." The red plum swordsman turned around again. Indeed, Pang Chongtian had already moved. He flew in the direction he came from like a gust of wind. The red plum swordsman was not in a hurry. He smiled and said, "That's what I said. How can the Dao sect cultivators see through the ambush set up by the failing sword manor? Liao Jing, let us kill this bastard." "Daoist Guan is right. Please." Liao Jinyu moved and turned into a sword radiance. He chased after Pang Chongtian and chuckled softly. Pang Chongtian was the first to move. However, his flying technique was not as good as the two swordsmen. In less than 5 minutes, the two swordsmen had caught up with Pang Chongtian. Failing sword manners, Daoist Guan waved his hand. The withered branch in his hand flashed with a bright red sword radiance. Red plum blossoms appeared on the flying sword and rushed towards Pang Chongtian like a rain of red plum blossoms. The red plum blossoms cut through the air and made strange sounds. At the same time, Liao Jinyu was even faster. His left arm swayed and the same silver light flashed. His fist seemed to have left his arm and smashed towards Pang Chongtian's back like a meteor with the power to kill in one blow. Pang Chongtian did not dare to delay. He waved his right arm and an 8 trigrams flag flew out. The 8 trigrams flag flew into the air and instantly expanded. The 8 trigrams flag fluttered in the wind. The 8 trigrams flag on the flag emitted 8 different lights and flew out of the flag to protect Pang Chongtian's back. Woo! Liao Jinyu's fist arrived first and hit the center of the 8 trigrams brilliance. There was a burst of brilliance and the dazzling brilliance stopped the fist. However, the moment it stopped, the 8 trigrams brilliance spun rapidly and retreated a few feet before stopping. Liao Jinyu was shocked. He activated the sword origin in his body and wanted to swing his fist again. However, there was a suction force from the 8 trigrams brilliance. It was as if his fist was stuck in a quagmire and could not be pulled out. At this moment, the red plum flying sword flew into the 8 trigrams brilliance. A surge of red light instantly filled the 8 trigrams brilliance. Break! Liao Jinyu and Guan Jianyu cried out almost at the same time. A blinding silver light and dozens of dark red lights flashed out from the 8 dimmed lights at the same time. Rumble, there was a loud sound and the 8 trigrams brilliance was annihilated, revealing the flag. At this moment there were cracks all over the flag. Looking at Pang Chong Tian again, his face flushed red and then turned pale. Sigh, Pang Chong Tian slapped his hand and the broken 8 trigrams brilliance returned to his body. He said softly, Daoist Jiang Daoist Luan, if you didn't come out I would have died. At this moment, Guan Jinyu and Liao Jinyu ignored him and continued to attack Pang Chong Tian with their flying swords and fists. Daoist Pang is indeed powerful. Even though you fell into the sword cultivator's trap, you still managed to lure them over. A rough voice came from the mountain below the three of them. Along with the voice, a ray of purple light shot into the sky toward sword friend Guan. Inside the light was an inch-long flying sword that was flashing with a demonic aura. It stabbed toward sword friend Guan's forehead. A few hundred feet away from the purple brilliance, there was also a blue brilliance. There was water splashing inside and it shot toward Liao Jinyu with a power that could shatter everything. Oh, he still has a backup plan. Liao Jinyu and Guan Jinyu saw 2 more Dharma treasures flying toward them and realized something. They looked at each other. Liao Jinyu formed a sword seal and punched again at the water splashing below him. Boom! With a loud bang, the fist smashed into the water. Although the water splashed everywhere, the fist was also sent flying back under the pressure of the water. Connate heavy water? Liao Jinyu was also knowledgeable. He raised his eyebrows and exclaimed in shock. Haha, since you know the power of this treasure, why don't you give up your life? Under the blue brilliance, a middle-aged cultivator with a face as white as jade flew up. It was Kunlun Sec's Jiang Shan. Jiang Shan was dressed in a Taoist robe. His left hand was stretched out and there was a small jade bottle in it. The monstrous splash of water had flown out from that small bottle. As a murderous look flashed between Jiang Shan's brows, the jade bottle once again shook with a blue brilliance. Another drop of connate heavy water flew out. The moment the heavy water left the jade bottle, it immediately turned into millions of water droplets that formed a wave that slammed towards Liao Jinyu. Chapter 2393. Swordsman Guan saw the purple flying sword and sneered in his heart. He waved his hand and hundreds of red plum blossoms surged forward, stabbing towards the purple light. Zai! A sharp sound rang out and the dozens of red plum blossoms were pierced by the purple flying sword, turning into dark red splatters that fell to the ground. The purple flying sword's sword light turned into a purple line within the red plum blossoms. It bypassed the red plum blossoms and stabbed towards Swordsman Guan's forehead. Ah? A spirit-severing flying sword? However, Guan Jinyu felt an incomparable sharp pain between his eyebrows. He suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but cry out in shock. Ha ha ha! Under the purple light, a short cultivator with a pointy mouth appeared. It was Luan Jianxing, the golden core cultivator of the Tongyi sect. He held a palm-sized gourd in his hand. The purple light was emitted from the gourd that had been uncovered. How could it be a spirit-severing flying sword? Liao Jinyu waved his hand and his fist turned into dozens of fists. Each one was like a meteor as they flew towards the waves of heavy water. Swordsman Guan suddenly understood and activated his sword technique. The red plum blossoms once again flew in a mysterious dance and cut apart the purple line. That's right, it's just an imitation magic treasure. Seeing the spirit-severing flying sword easily broken by the red plum blossoms, Swordsman Guan let out a long sigh and sneered, if you could use a real spirit-severing flying sword, you'd already be a late nascent soul cultivator, right? Why would you ambush us illusory swordsman? Why would I need a real spirit-severing flying sword to deal with you two illusory swordsmen? Wang Jianxing laughed and the purple light from the gourd flew out again. It circled around the dozens of red plum blossoms that had already flown to Wang Jianxing's side. Pa pa pa, like candlelight bursting in the night, the sword light that could easily kill a Foundation establishment cultivator was annihilated by the purple light. Only a 3-foot-long flying sword remained. His swordsman Guan couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He knew in his heart that his flying sword was indeed inferior to the spirit-severing flying dagger. He was afraid that he really wasn't a match for this guy. Guan Jianyu looked at Liao Jianyu again. Although there were quite a number of illusionary fists, they weren't as solid as the previous one. It was barely satisfactory to withstand Jiang Shan's connate heavy water. Let's go. Guan Jianyu waved his hand and the red plum sword flew back. Guan Jianyu's body flashed with sword light, and his entire body condensed into the shape of a giant sword. He flew towards the glacier from before. Haha, at this point you still want to escape. Pang Chongtian laughed heartily when he saw this. With a wave of his hand, the damaged 8 trigrams flag appeared once again. The slightly dim 8 balls of light whizzed and rotated in front of Guan Jianyu. Ignorant. Guan Jianyu sneered. A sound similar to the sound of a golden drum rang out. The giant sword pierced into the 8 balls of light. Fellow Taoist one, help me. The huge sword's sharp sword chi pierced into the 8 trigrams flag. The 8 balls of light were already in a mess. Pang Chongdan panicked and had no choice but to call for help. Watch this old man. Wang Jianxing moved with the voice. He threw the small purple gourd in his hand, and the spirit-severing flying knife immediately flew out of the small gourd. It turned into a swimming fish and rapidly pierced towards Guan Jianyu's flying sword. Before the spirit-severing flying knife could get close, the killing intent that was suppressing the sword spirit was forced into the flying sword. The giant sword rumbled and shook a few times. Guan Jianyu could no longer maintain his flying sword form and revealed his huge body. Guan Jianyu's eyes flashed with shock. He didn't have time to deal with the 8 trigrams flag. He waved his hand and the red plum blossom blocked the spirit-severing flying knife again. Fellow Taoist Feng, fellow Taoist you, if you don't come out now, I will really be helpless. Guan Jianyu smiled bitterly. He looked around and whispered. Oh. When these words entered their ears, not only was Wang Jianxing shocked, even Pang Chongtian was shocked. This shock was as if they had seen the world's biggest joke. Haha, you are about to die and you are still playing tricks. Don't you think it's funny? Pang Chongtian didn't think that the sword cultivators would have any other means to deal with his hidden attack. However, just as Pang Chongtian finished speaking, a gust of wind blew through the sky. 2 bird cultivators flapped their 100-feet-long wings and rushed down. That arrogant and unruly voice sounded, "Ha, just a few boy. Guan Peng, you can't deal with them? I'm not as good as the 2 seniors." Guan Peng controlled the red plum blossom sword and tried his best to block the spirit-severing flying knife. He smiled and said, "These are 3 golden core cultivators. Their magic treasures are the perfect counter to my flying sword. I still need the help of the 2 seniors." Wu, the bird cultivator in front, flapped his wings. A strong wind blew from his wings. Countless wind blades that could cut through ice flew towards Wang Jianxing and Pang Chongtian like a storm. The bird cultivator behind him was even more powerful. A faint blue light flashed between his wings, and the abundant water-based spiritual energy above the glacier immediately condensed. As he flapped his wings, the wind blades swooped down, and each ice particle seemed to be condensed with a huge amount of mana. Go. Pang Chongtian wanted to use the 8 trigrams flag again. However, when he scanned it with his divine perception, he sensed the power of the wind blades and ice particles. He knew that his 8 trigrams flag might not be able to block them. He shouted and flew towards the south. After Pang Chongtian left, Jiang Shan and Wang Jianxing didn't dare to stay any longer. They kept their magic treasures and used their flying techniques to escape. Luckily, the 3 of them were surrounding Guan Peng and Liao Jianyu. The 2 bird cultivators, Wind Sword Friend and Rain Sword Friend, were attacking from above. There was a gap for them to escape. Chase. Swordsmen would never look down on cultivators fleeing. Sword Friend Wind and Sword Friend Rain flapped their wings and chased after the 3 like rays of light. Guan Peng was a little hesitant. He used his divine perception to scan the situation at the glacier and then used it to scan the area within dozens of miles. Oh? However, when Guan Peng's divine sense swept to the east, it paused for a moment. Then his face relaxed and he didn't hesitate to sweep to other places. When he saw that there were no special cultivators within a few dozen kilometers, his figure flashed and he chased after them on the red plum sword. Ah? Illusory swordsman. On the flowing cloud-flying ship dozens of miles away, Guan Peng's divine perception locked onto Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao. That strong divine perception indicated that a golden core sword cultivator had seen them. Of course, Li Zongbao and Xiao Hua's reactions were different from what Guan Peng expected. They were actually excited. "Brother Li, is this divine perception Qin Jian's?" Xiao Hua asked Li Zongbao hurriedly when the divine perception paused for a moment. Chapter 2394. I'm not too sure. Li Zongbao had never met Qin Jian before, so he couldn't be sure. However, since they're in the Gale snowfield, it must be Qin Jian. Quick, let's kill our way over. Oh, not good. There are actually 4 illusory swordsmen and 3 golden core swordsmen. I don't know which one is Qin Jian. Xiao Hua stealthily released his Buddhist sense and easily saw the 7 people who had already flown to the edge of his Buddhist sense. At this time, the bird cultivator Feng Jianyu was slightly startled. As if he had noticed the Buddhist sense, he immediately released his divine sense. Xiao Hua was shocked. This was the second time someone had seen through his Buddhist sense, and this person wasn't a Buddhist disciple. He naturally didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly withdrew his Buddhist sense. Sensing that Feng Jianyu had released his divine sense, Guan Peng asked curiously, "Senior Feng, is there something wrong?" Feng Jianyu didn't answer but scanned with his divine sense. After a while, he revealed a trace of confusion and replied, "I seem to have sensed someone spying on us." "Oh, it can't be." Guan Peng was about to cry. The bird cultivators surnamed Feng and Yu were his last resort. If the Dao sect cultivators still had a backup plan, he really had to admire the cultivators' schemes. But this spying doesn't seem to be the Dao sect's method. Feng Jianyu added, "And it's coming from that direction." Seeing that Feng Jianyu was pointing in the direction of the Gale snowfield and not the direction he was pursuing, Guan Peng's heart calmed down. He pondered for a moment and said, "Junior has already scouted this area. Not far from where we ambushed the Dao sect cultivators, there should be 2 7 skills sect disciples riding a flying boat. However, their cultivation is only at the foundation establishment stage, so they can't affect the battle. Moreover, once they sense that something is wrong, they'll definitely escape on the flying boat. There's nothing special in the surrounding 10 miles. 2 foundation establishment cultivators?" Feng Jianyu was slightly puzzled. What are they doing in the Gale snowfield? How would Junior know? Perhaps they're here for the Gale or Vein of Xuanyan school. Guan Peng answered casually, but he was still worried about Feng Jianyu's innate perception. He asked, "Did Senior discover anything?" "No." The bird cultivator surnamed Feng said resolutely, "I didn't even see those 2 foundation establishment disciples." "Perhaps." Guan Peng was a little hesitant. "Junior should go and watch the children fight?" The bird cultivator surnamed Feng heard the questioning tone in Guan Peng's voice. He knew that Guan Peng was asking if his perception was correct. The bird cultivator surnamed Feng laughed bitterly. That was merely a type of perception, one that disappeared in a flash. How could he be sure? No need. The bird cultivator surnamed Feng pondered for a moment before coming to a decision. "I didn't really sense that person. Perhaps I was just nervous. What's more, that person was able to evade my detection. His cultivation is definitely above mine. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for you to stay." This Junior understands. Guan Peng had already taken the disturbance of the Buddhist awareness as a sign of nervousness from the bird cultivator surnamed Feng. After all, even though his cultivation was inferior to the bird cultivators, the difference wasn't that great. How could the bird cultivator sense something that he couldn't? The cunning cultivator is escaping towards the spirit stone mine of Xuanyan School. If I'm not wrong, they will send out a message talisman. It's best that we stick to our original plan. It's better for this Junior to chase after them than to stay behind. The bird cultivator surnamed Feng didn't say anything else. He flapped his wings and his body suddenly sped up as he chased after Pang Chongtian and the others. Which one is Qin Jian? In the distance Xiao Hua steered the flying boat. He was still hesitating whether he should tell Li Zongbao, or if he should steer the flowing cloud flying boat and chase after them like Li Zongbao. After all, if he added himself, it wouldn't be difficult to kill 4 sword cultivators. If I do that, I won't be able to hide my cultivation. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly again. He had already decided in his heart that he would reveal his cultivation in this battle. However, he could only reveal 40% of his cultivation, which would stop at the late stage of foundation establishment. Even if he used his Dharma treasure, he wouldn't be able to surpass the early stage of golden core. After killing the beast cultivators earlier, Li Zongbao already had doubts about Xiao Hua's Dharma power. Even though he didn't say it, Xiao Hua knew in his heart. If he could even kill golden core cultivators, there was no point in hiding it. Not good. Just as Xiao Hua was hesitating, Li Zongbao shouted, "My Dao sect disciples are being attacked by sword cultivators. Xiao Hua, don't be slow. Hurry up and steer the flying boat." You only noticed it now. Xiao Hua made a rough estimation. He knew that even though Li Zongbao was already in the late stage of foundation establishment, his spiritual force was still shocking. They were still 20 miles away from the battle, but his spiritual force was more than twice that of a normal late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Yes, I understand. Following Li Zongbao's instructions, Xiao Hua steered the flowing cloud flying boat. The flowing cloud flying boat was indeed faster than before, and it rushed towards the oval ice lake. The battle above the ice lake was definitely comparable to the battle at Golden Spring Mountain. Hundreds of Dharma treasures stirred the heaven and earth spiritual chi and rushed into the air. All kinds of brilliance bloomed and smashed towards the sword cultivators opposite them. Among the sword cultivators, flying swords were also released. Sword light flashed and pierced into the cultivators' bodies. Blood light flashed, comparable to the brilliance of Dharma treasures. The smell of blood gradually rose, comparable to the surging spiritual chi. The 400 cultivators of the Dao sect were surrounded by nearly 700 sword cultivators. They fought with all their might. In the time that the golden core cultivators fought and hurriedly escaped, nearly 100 people had already died. Their corpses were all pierced, and their incomplete corpses fell onto the ice surface that was as cold as a mirror. The blood flowing on the corpses only flowed half an inch before it froze. Looking at the sword cultivators, they were not much better off. Dozens of corpses were also left near the sword cultivators' corpses. Their heads, chests, and bodies were all badly mutilated. They were all hit by Dharma treasures. The corpses above the ice lake, other than the difference between sword equipment and Taoist robes, there was really no difference between the two corpses. Or perhaps the living people were different but the dead people were no different. "Don't you dare hurt my Dao sect disciples." Li Zongbao didn't wait for the flying boat to approach the battlefield. As usual, he shouted and flew up. The immortal piercing whip in his hand was also held upside down. The whip streaked through the air and smashed towards the sword cultivator closest to him. The two sides in the fierce battle simply didn't have the time to check the arrival of Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao. Only when they heard Li Zongbao's angry roar did they look up. However, when they saw only the two of them, the cultivators' hearts turned cold, while the sword cultivators' hearts secretly laughed. However, what use could 2 foundation establishment disciples make in this great battle? Oh, why isn't he a disciple of my 7 skills sect? Naturally, there were also those who first saw the flowing cloud flying boat and then saw Li Zongbao. They had some strange thoughts, but this thought disappeared in an instant. A sword cultivator's flying sword was more important than the flowing cloud flying boat. Of course, there were also those who secretly thought of seizing the boat and fleeing. However, after Li Zongbao flew out of the flowing cloud flying boat, Xiao Hua also put the boat into his space. This ended some people's thoughts. Li Zongbao. Can your brotherly? Hurry. There were actually disciples of the Utopia faction here. When they saw Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip, they immediately recognized Li Zongbao. Knowing Li Zongbao's power, they hurriedly shouted. Xiao Hua's divine sense quickly swept through the crowd of cultivators. He actually didn't see any disciples wearing the Imperial Thunder Sect's robes. "Don't hurt my Utopia faction's disciples." Seeing that the Utopia faction's disciples were in imminent danger, How could Li Zongbao still cooperate with Xiaohua? Whip shadows repeatedly smashed towards a few sword cultivator disciples. Pa pa pa, a few crisp sounds rang out. How could those swordsmen who had fought with the cultivators until their sword energy was somewhat exhausted resist Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip? Several flying swords were scattered in all directions, and the whip shadows also fell on the swordsmen's bodies. Several swordsmen fell into the air with their flesh lacerated. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Great! When the cultivators around Li Zongbao saw this scene, their hearts were greatly shaken. Their somewhat disheartened hearts were once again filled with vitality. Hurry! Fellow swordsmen, kill this bastard first. Not far from Li Zongbao, a 5th-grade swordsman saw this and hurriedly transmitted his voice. There were originally more swordsmen than cultivators. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Only a few swordsmen barely escaped the killing whip shadows. Again, the person who had previously organized a group of swordsmen to besiege Li Zongbao also narrowly escaped. He gnashed his teeth and shouted, "We have 700 cultivators. I don't believe that this guy can kill us one by one. Even if it's tiring, we'll exhaust him to death." Of course, seeing that Li Zongbao's face was already a little flushed, it was already a reaction from using the immortal piercing whip too much. Even if one whip didn't hinder him or several whips didn't hinder him, it was impossible for Li Zongbao to swing the whip dozens of times. "We'll also come to rescue fellow cultivator Li." The cultivators of the Taoist faction also had foresight. Immediately, someone clamored and flew towards Li Zongbao. Chapter 2395. At this moment, bang bang bang. A series of loud noises rang out. Not far from the crowd, Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal once again showed its might, smashing down several swordsmen from the sky. Looking at their badly mutilated appearance, it was obvious they couldn't survive. Good. The cultivators who came to save Li Zongbao obviously didn't expect Xiaohua to be so fierce. They were all overjoyed, and there were even some cultivators who gathered around Xiaohua. Kill. The person who organized the swordsmen was furious. It's just 2 Foundation establishment disciples. At most they are at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment. We have more than 10 6th-grade swordsmen. How can we not succeed? If that's the case, we don't need to return to the sword domain. Yes. The group of disciples also shouted in unison, the flying swords in their hands flashing, either besieging Li Zongbao and Xiaohua, or preventing others from approaching. "Ah, kill!" Li Zongbao laughed loudly. He slapped his hand and a medicinal pill entered his mouth. The immortal piercing whip in his hand struck out mercilessly, and the whip's afterimages once again attacked the surrounding swordsmen. Sweat. Xiaohua saw Li Zongbao risk his life like this, as if he wasn't worried about his own life. Moreover, Xiaohua already saw that although the magic power in the whip's afterimages was surging, the whip's afterimages were already slightly clear. Clearly, it was the appearance of insufficient magic power. Moreover, the immortal piercing whip once again struck the flying swords of many swordsmen, but it only knocked down the flying swords and didn't break them like before. This Li Zongbao isn't too fierce? Does this have something to do with his cultivation method? Looking at Li Zongbao's white hair fluttering in the wind as well as the magic power surging around his body, and the increasingly indifferent expression in his eyes, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel somewhat worried. "Little thief, take this." Just as Xiaohua was worried about the others, more than 10 swordsmen also surrounded him, the flying swords in their hands stabbing out at the same time. Their sinister smiles clearly showed that they saw Xiaohua as a dead man. "Damn it, if I don't show my might, you guys will think I'm a sick cat." The corner of Xiaohua's mouth curled up slightly. He pointed with his finger and the cloud-suppressing seal flew high into the air. Its ancient bronze brilliance scattered all over, and it was precisely protecting his entire body. Then with a wave of his hand he took out the soul-absorbing bell and the soul tool toad. When the soul strands came out from the law eye imprint, a loud dang rang out. The soul-absorbing bell sounded like a big yellow bell, and it shook the area around dozens of meters. With a buzzing sound, the 10 sword cultivators were unable to resist at all. They immediately fell from the sky. Their eyes were tightly shut and their expressions were fierce. It was as if they had fallen asleep. Ah! The cultivators around Xiaohua also felt their souls tremble and their minds become muddled. When they regained their senses, they saw many sword cultivators land and they all activated their magic treasures to attack the sword cultivator whose fate they didn't know. Great Xiaohua was overjoyed. He urged his magic power and flew towards the place where there were more swordsmen. He took out the soul-absorbing bell again. Dang dang dang, the soul-absorbing bell shook several times and each time, a dozen swordsmen would fall from the sky. This soul-absorbing bell was simply a great killing tool for swordsmen in a group battle. Not far away, Li Zongbao injured another dozen swordsmen with great difficulty, and the other cultivators swarmed up to kill them. He himself took a medicinal pill and took a breath. Seeing Xiaohua take down a dozen sword cultivators so easily, his eyes also flashed with extraordinary splendor. Just as Xiaohua was happily shaking the soul-suppressing bell, his mind suddenly became muddled, and he also felt a similar feeling of his soul wanting to leave his body from the mysterious dark clouds. What's going on? Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. He hastily released his Buddhist sense, but he didn't see any eyesores in the surroundings. Apart from the swordsmen hiding in all directions, and the cultivators who were wild with joy, there was no one else. Could it be? Xiaohua suddenly understood. He didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest, and hastily sent his primordial spirit into the mysterious dark cloud. Sure enough, outside the mysterious dark cloud, the brilliance of Xiaohua's newly obtained spiritual armor was somewhat dim, as if it had suffered a heavy blow. And inside the mysterious dark cloud, within the heaven ring of Qi, the originally spirited primordial spirit was now dispirited and listless, as if it had used too much strength. It quietly floated there without the slightest bit of strength. And above the primordial spirit, the clear sky was now densely covered with dark clouds, and those dark clouds were also somewhat damaged. I was a little too pleased with myself. Even if the power of my soul is extremely great after all, this young master's cultivation is only at the heaven ring of Qi. I still can't control it as I wish. Xiaohua understood that he had suffered a backlash from the soul-absorbing bell, causing his heaven ring of Qi primordial spirit to be like this. He thought for a moment and hastily put the soul-toad and soul-absorbing bell into his space. Seeing Xiaohua actually put away the soul-absorbing bell, many cultivators who had gathered couldn't help but feel disappointed. A late-stage Foundation establishment disciple anxiously said, "This junior brother of the Imperial Thunder Sect, that magic tool of yours is very useful. Why don't you continue to use it? If you knock it a dozen more times, these swordsmen will all be killed by us." Xiaohua spread out his hands and said with a bitter smile, "This senior brother. It's not that this little brother doesn't want to. You see, this little brother is only at the early stage of Foundation establishment, not even at the middle stage of Foundation establishment. That magic tool consumes magic power, and this little brother's magic power is already insufficient. If I knock it a dozen more times, I'll definitely die. It's only a magic tool." That disciple was at a loss for words, but without waiting for him to speak again, another flying sword took advantage of the chaos to fly over, scaring him into a fluster. How could he still have the time to blame Xiaohua? Go! Xiaohua pointed his finger at the cloud-suppressing seal, and that magic tool once again danced with a rumbling sound, shooting down several swordsmen into the air. Seeing Xiaohua actually use his magic tool again, that late-stage Foundation establishment disciple who had just reprimanded Xiaohua was somewhat speechless. At this time, Xiaohua had used the cloud-suppressing seal to kill nearly 15 swordsmen, and used the soul-absorbing bell to shoot down nearly 60 swordsmen. Li Zongbao's side had also killed 30 swordsmen. In total, 100 swordsmen had fallen because of the arrival of these two people. However, the fall of these 100 or so swordsmen was still not enough to reverse the defeat of the cultivators. Moreover, in the eyes of the swordsmen, Xiaohua and Li Zongbao had done it in a spurt of energy, so they were bound to exhaust themselves again and again. Just as the swordsman expected, Xiaohua had put away his soul-absorbing bell, and Li Zongbao, who was previously the most eye-catching, was even worse. At this time his piercing immortal whip was no longer the same as it had been at the beginning, where it could strike several people at once. It could only strike one swordsman at a time, and that piercing immortal whip's power was also greatly reduced. Kill, another unknown sword cultivator cheered from a distance. They've already exhausted their magic power. We only need to put in a bit more effort and we'll definitely be able to kill them all. Many swordsmen couldn't see whether Xiaohua's magic power had been exhausted or not, but the cloud-suppressing seal was also not as conspicuous as the piercing immortal whip. However, the cultivators could clearly see that Li Zongbao's face was flashing with an extremely abnormal red halo. This was precisely the symptom of taking too many medicinal pills, causing spiritual energy to stagnate in his body. Chapter 2396. Li Zongbao once again struck down a swordsman with the piercing immortal whip, and another flying sword quietly approached from the side. Li Zongbao simply had no time to detect it. After Xiaohua blocked a sword cultivator's flying sword, he sighed and waved his hand. The soaring dragon shears flew out, and a golden light flashed and split the flying sword in half. When he saw the familiar golden light, Li Zongbao suddenly came to his senses. He looked back at Xiaohua and forced a smile. Looking at Li Zongbao's smile that was uglier than crying, Xiaohua suddenly had a trace of understanding in his heart. Reputation is also tiring. If Li Zongbao wasn't so famous in the utmost happiness faction, he could totally withdraw and leave now. But because of this reputation he had to protect it. Make it difficult for him to escape. Look at me again, who knows who I am? Even if they know I'm a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, so what? Xiaohua's cultivation is not even in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. It's already good that I can escape. Can I still care about you? Even if I can't brazenly use the flowing cloud flying ship of the Qiqiao sect, I still have my life. What about Li Zongbao? If this guy didn't come with me today, I don't even know if he can keep his life. But who asked him to be so lucky? To be able to come with me, this is also a cause and effect. Maybe it's the cause and effect that I sensed in the Golden Spring Mountain array. Presumably Xiaohua pointed his finger and the cloud-suppressing seal was stored in the space. Then, with a shake of his shoulder, the more than 400 feet phoenix celestial body let out a phoenix cry and was released from his physical body. Oh, it's a little weird. Once the phoenix celestial body was released from his physical body, a strange feeling filled Xiaohua's mind. It was as if another him had appeared in the Dawn Rain continent, and the more than 400 feet phoenix celestial body was his own body. Previously Xiaohua's physical body and the phoenix celestial body had the same feeling, but it was very different from this feeling. Yes, it was a completely different feeling. A kind of dominating celestial body, a kind of feeling of seeing the world through the eyes of the celestial body. The phoenix celestial body hovered in the air. Not only did its aura become more intense, but its previously blurry eyes also opened at this moment. However, there was a faint silver-white brilliance flashing in his eyes. Within the brilliance, there were countless planets that were slowly revolving. Xiaohua's phoenix celestial body spread its wings, and the wind and lightning between its wings vibrated. Several purple lightning bolts shot out from between its wings and struck several sword cultivators. At the same time, the phoenix celestial body's claws also brandished lightning, and dozens of lightning bolts shot out at lightning speed, hitting the swordsman who wanted to attack Li Zongbao. Even the faint black clouds in the sky were gradually condensing, as if attracted by the phoenix celestial body. Lightning was a swordsman's nemesis. When the dozen or so lightning bolts struck out, each of them struck down a swordsman's flying sword and injured the swordsman. Not good. He's the Terror Phoenix. A hysterical voice sounded from afar. All of a sudden, fear appeared on the faces of the swordsmen who were shocked by the phenomenon of the phoenix dharma body flying out. As for the other cultivators of the Tao sect, they were also shocked. Among them there were also true bloodline disciples, but they didn't dare to release their celestial bodies. With celestial bodies they could use secret techniques in battle, but in a fight with swordsmen, the celestial body would be an absolute target for the flying sword once it appeared. No one dared to take such a big risk. However, not only did Xiaohua do it, but his celestial body was also incomparably powerful once it appeared. The Imperial Thunder technique couldn't be used with his physical body. What made the cultivators even more confused was the fear of swordsmen. In fact, even Xiao Hua himself didn't know that his reputation was so resounding. The Terror Phoenix, this code name that represented slaughter, spread like wildfire after the Battle of Chicken Cry Mountain. Of course, this was only limited to sword nurturing and drawing swordsmen. Illusory swordsmen were rarely heard of. However, after the Battle of Golden Spring Mountain, this reputation spread to all swordsmen below sword transformation. After all, there was no wall that didn't have a crack in this world. The dozen or so illusory sword cultivators of the Ling Feng sword sect went to the Golden Spring Mountain Spirit Stone Vein and none of them survived. This was already a secret that everyone knew. What did Ling Yunwu go there for? Why was there such a big fanfare? Perhaps no one knew the purpose, but these swordsmen knew that Ling Yunwu and the dozen or so illusory swordsmen of the Ling Feng sword sect were going to kill the cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect called Terror Phoenix. A mere Foundation establishment cultivator. However, nearly 20 illusory swordsmen didn't survive. In the Golden Spring Mountain Spirit Stone Vein, only 13 Dao sect cultivators survived. Among them there were no Imperial Thunder sect disciples. In other words, 20 illusory swordsmen died together with the Terror Phoenix. When they heard this news, the other illusory swordsmen were all shocked. They really couldn't think of how a Foundation establishment cultivator could kill 20 swordsmen whose strength was comparable to Gold Core stage. However, when they understood the situation of the Golden Spring Mountain Great Array, they suddenly understood. Although the Terror Phoenix couldn't kill them all, it could at least delay them all, right? This also explained the huge loss of sword cultivators in Golden Spring Mountain. That was 20 illusory swords. However, even if the Terror Phoenix could delay all 20 illusory swords, when the Golden Spring Mountain Great Array was activated, the strength of the Terror Phoenix definitely couldn't be underestimated. Of course, this was only their guess, but this guess was also infinitely close to the reality. When this rumor reached the ears of the illusory swordsmen, it changed again. They were originally afraid of the Terror Phoenix. As the rumor spread, it became that the Terror Phoenix had killed nearly 20 illusory swords by itself. Those illusory swordsmen also risked their lives to perish together with the Terror Phoenix. Thus, in these 5 years the Terror Phoenix became a legend. A legend of one person resisting over 1,000 illusory swordsmen. A legend of one person exterminating 10 illusory swords by himself. Now, when everyone was in the midst of killing, when everyone was shocked by the lightning, that illusory swordsman shouted out the name of the Terror Phoenix. How could it not cause all the illusory swordsmen to panic? The appearance of the Terror Phoenix was a question. This killing god killed nearly 20 illusory swords by himself and escaped unscathed. The Golden Spring Mountain Great Array that even the illusory swordsmen were helpless against was also unable to trap him. Such a ferocious cultivator. Which illusory swordsman could stop him? The Terror Phoenix is alive. The Terror Phoenix is here. Quickly run. In the blink of an eye, this thought of fleeing in fear spread from Xiao Hua to all the illusory swordsmen. Speaking of which, it was quite normal. The battlefield was such a wondrous place. If everyone worked together to kill, even if they were weaker, they could still win. However, if someone had the intention to flee, everyone would immediately have the same thought. Even if they were stronger, they could still retreat in defeat. Once they were defeated, they would scatter. This was probably the saying. Nearly 500 to 600 illusory swordsmen retreated like a flock of bees without the slightest bit of order. This caused the cultivators who were already half dead to be stunned on the spot. They couldn't understand if the illusory swordsmen were really defeated and retreated, or if they had some tricks to harm others. Everyone stood in mid-air blankly. Their magic treasures and other items were activated in mid-air. They didn't know if they should chase, or chase. Not only was Xiao Hua stunned, even his Phoenix Dharma body was also frozen in mid-air. Rumble. Lightning also condensed between the Phoenix claws. He was baffled as he watched the illusory swordsman flee. Only when all the illusory swordsmen had flown several hundred feet away did Xiao Hua wake up as if from a dream. His wings flapped and more than 10 lightning bolts struck down. Quickly chase, these illusory swordsmen really retreated in defeat. As Xiao Hua spoke, his phoenix Dharma body flapped its wings and chased after the illusory swordsman. The shadow of nearly 400 feet was cast on the ice lake, blocking the bodies of some illusory swordsmen. Those illusory swordsmen were even more frightened. They urged their flying swords with all their might, wanting to escape the shadow of the phoenix Dharma body. This is a little strange. At this time Xiao Hua suddenly discovered that his phoenix Dharma body could actually fly several hundred feet away. It was even extending and didn't need his own body to follow. This secret method of tempering the Dharma body is indeed useful. Xiao Hua's primordial spirit was very strong, but none of it could truly leave the body. Now that he saw the phoenix Dharma body showing signs of leaving, he was naturally very happy. Of course, the phoenix Dharma body stopped after 200 feet away from the body. It couldn't go any further. Oh, why aren't you chasing? Xiao Hua probed the depths of the phoenix Dharma body and was about to urge his flying technique. But when he turned his head, he saw that all the Dao sect cultivators had stopped, put away their magic tools and magic treasures, and began to take medicinal pills. Fellow Taoist from the Imperial Thunder sect, a Middle Foundation establishment cultivator respectfully replied when he heard Xiao Hua's question, "It's not that we don't chase, but that we can't. You see, we have less than 200 people, how could we dare to continue chasing? We are already overjoyed that they can retreat. Besides, who knows if these cunning illusory swordsmen have an ambush ahead." It turned out that these cultivators were also frightened by the illusory swordsman's ambush. They had all forgotten how they treated illusory swordsmen. Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao again. Li Zongbao's face was the same as before, and there was even a hint of paleness in the pale gold color. Presumably it was more serious than before. Yes, in this kind of situation, it's fine if they can escape with their lives, but who would still chase after illusory swordsmen? Xiao Hua nodded slightly. Then Xiao Hua's face flushed red again, looking like he had suffered a backlash from his true essence. Senior Martial Brother Li, Xiao Hua withdrew his phoenix Dharma body and flew in front of Li Zongbao, asking in a low voice, "How is Senior Martial Brother's situation? What should we do next? Little Brother's magic power has also suffered a backlash." Li Zongbao looked at this Imperial Thunder sect disciple who surprised him again and again. He opened his mouth not knowing what to say. After a moment he said in a low voice, "I'm fine, I just need to cultivate for a few days." What's important now is that we quickly change our location and don't let the illusory swordsmen come back. However, with Junior Martial Brother Xiao here, I'm afraid they won't dare to come back. Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua thoughtfully and added, "However, you can't show that your magic power is exhausted. If they see through it, we'll all be in trouble." I'm afraid that he wanted to join forces with junior apprentice brother Ji Mingkuan, who was guarding the spirit stone vein, to resist the enemy together? Yes, junior apprentice brother Pang could only do so. Li Zongbao nodded slightly and sighed. This was what it meant to go for wool and come home shorn. I'm afraid, it's not that simple. Xiao Hua naturally knew that sword cultivators had as many as 4 illusory swords and 3 golden core cultivators. It was definitely not just one, as Pan Hao said. I have a good friend in Xuanyan school named Shu Qingyuan. I wonder how he is now. Xiao Hua opened his eyes and asked, "Oh, so you and junior apprentice brother Zhuo are very close." Pan Hao saw Xiao Hua ask a rare question and hurriedly smiled apologetically. Junior apprentice brother Zhuo's cultivation has always been stagnant in the Qi refinement realm. Of course, he was sent out during the war. Unfortunately, he died on the battlefield in the first battle. Even his corpse was not found. Oh, Xiao Hua sighed. For no reason he felt a burst of sadness in his heart. He recalled the first time he saw Zhuo Qingyuan outside Jingbua City. At that time he was only at the 2nd layer of the Qi refinement realm, while Zhuo Qingyuan was already at the 11th layer of the Qi refinement realm. Even Xiao Mao was already at the 4th layer of the Qi refinement realm. The second time he saw Zhuo Qingyuan was with Kai Zhuoxia. Moreover, because he received information about the fire essence flame crystal, he began his miraculous journey of using the fire essence flame crystal to refine his body. The third time he saw Zhuo Qingyuan was at the Taiqing sect's Feather Immortal Assembly. At that time Xiaohua was already at the beginning of the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm. Zhuo Qingyuan was only at the peak of the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm and had yet to build his foundation. After that there was no more news about him. Until today, when he asked for information about his old friend, he had already turned into ashes. This is very common in the Dawn Rain continent. We're still at the foundation building realm. When we reach the Gold Core realm and the Nascent Soul realm, we can go into seclusion for dozens of years or even hundreds of years. Those Qi refinement and foundation building juniors, because their lifespans have come to an end, even without this sword battle, they can only see you go into seclusion. They can't see you come out. Li Zongbao looked at Xiaohua's rueful expression and said in a low voice, "Many thanks for Brother Li's guidance." Xiaohua took a deep breath and laughed inwardly. He often referred to himself as young master, but after careful calculation he was probably dozens of years old now. Fortunately, young master has a face that doesn't age. Young master also has the qualifications to call himself young master. Xiaohua encouraged himself and then asked casually, "Zhuo Qingyuan has a junior martial brother named Xiao Mao. I wonder if he's doing well in Xuanyan school?" In Xiaohua's mind, Xiao Mao had the dragonization art, so building his foundation wouldn't be a problem. He wouldn't be sent out to Xuanyan school. Unexpectedly, a trace of astonishment appeared on Pan Hao's face. He asked curiously, "That Xiao Mao, isn't Zhuo Qingyuan's junior martial brother? Could it be that he's old friends with fellow Taoist?" When I saw Xiao Mao he was with Zhuo Qingyuan. I naturally thought that he was Zhuo Qingyuan's junior martial brother. What's his cultivation level now? Xiaohua said with a chuckle. "Oh, I'll let fellow Taoist know." Pan Hao didn't dare to hide and said, "Junior martial brother Xiao also went into battle with us. He was injured when he first participated in the battle, but after he recovered his cultivation level advanced by leaps and bounds. In just a few years he charged into the middle stage of foundation building. Right now he's with me." Since his cultivation level broke through, why didn't he withdraw from the battle? Xiaohua asked curiously. Fellow Taoist doesn't know. Pan Hao smiled apologetically. Xiao Mao's master is the famous gold core cultivator of my Xuanyan school, Senior Yuan Jiming. He advocated tempering one's cultivation during the battle. Therefore, although junior martial brother Xiao broke through to the middle stage of foundation building, he's still tempering himself during the battle. So that's how it is. Xiaohua nodded. However, he immediately had a bad feeling in his heart. He suddenly asked, "What did you say just now? Xiao Mao is with you?" Please. That you're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.